This one?
It has her name on it.
Thank you all for being here. We're glad that everyone has joined us. Senator Tyson is on WebEx, so she can be asking questions as well. And I see Representative Sawyer came in, and we're waiting for a couple people. Senator Warren is caught in traffic on the highway, so she'll be here any minute. So people, I think, will be kind of trickling in as we go along. We did not have any minutes, did we? We do? Okay. I didn't look at the minutes, I'm sorry. Oh, we have the minutes for 4/28 and 6/10. Are there any changes or corrections? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the preliminary minutes for April 28th, on the third page of committee discussion, there's just a sentence that says, there was discussion concerning the committee's ability to have oversight of agencies, whether to compel them to provide data or to adopt rules and regs. And I'm wondering if there's a way we can make that sentence more clear. Are we asking or questioning the committee's ability for either oversight of agencies? I mean, it almost seems like we need an and, to have oversight of agencies and whether to compel them to provide data. Or I would just suggest we add an and. How about that as a
We
motion?
could do that, and we'll wait for the revisor to.
Yeah, I don't have a legal issue with it.
Okay.
I mean, if you all agree that that reflects the intent of the committee, then you can make that change in the minutes.
Okay. Does anyone have a problem with that? Senator Thompson.
Not a problem, but just a suggestion. Perhaps you change it rather than and or just regarding. It may be the regarding whether, because I don't think it's a conjunctive. I think it's because we were talking about, regarding whether or not we could compel them to do so.
That's a fabulous substitute motion. I would second it.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second to change April 28th's meeting minutes. Are there any, is there any other discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. So we'll go back to if there is there any other discussion about either sets of minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Motion made by Representative Sutton to approve the April 28th and 6/10 meeting minutes. Is there a second? Senator Thompson, is there any discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Minutes are accepted as written. Then I think we're ready, unless someone else has something else they want to bring up right away. We're ready to start with the Office of Bank Commissioner, and that would be Brock. Is it correct, Roller?
Actually, I pronounced my last name Rayler, but that's
Rayler,
a very
okay.
common, I'm not going to say mistake, but misunderstanding.
Okay. Well, now I know what I'm supposed to do. So, Mr. Rayler, introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairperson Wassinger and members of the committee. My name is Brock Rayler. I'm General Counsel with Office of the State Bank Commissioner. I do have with me Assistant General Counsel Luis Solorio, and we're actually going to break up our testimony today. I'm going to speak about the repeal of the Savings and Loan Code regulations, and I'm saving the more interesting and fun regulation changes for my colleague, Mr. Solorio.
Okay.
So just a little bit of discussion about the timeline on the Savings and Loan Code. In 1993, this Office of the Savings and Loan Commissioner was abolished. And all of the duties associated with that office and the Savings and Loan Commissioner were transferred to the Bank Commissioner per KSA 75-1303 and 75-1310. At the time, this made a lot of sense. There were only two savings and loan codes, savings and loans that were regulated under the code. And in 1997, Southwestern Savings and Loan Association was acquired by a national bank, Southwest Kansas National Bank. And the final one, Postal Savings and Loan Association, was acquired by Silver Lake Bank on November 11th of 2011. So from 2011 to about 2018, there were no entities that were regulated under the Savings and Loan Code. We were approached by the Kansas Bankers Association because there was a national savings and loan that wanted to become regulated under Kansas. Although we originally were contemplating updating the Savings and Loan Code because it was woefully out of date, what we ended up doing is we actually modified the state banking code to allow a savings and loan code entity to become regulated under the banking code. And in fact, one savings association is regulated under the banking code, and that is mutual savings. Since 2018, that's been the only savings and loan that has been has taken advantage of that change in the code. So getting us up to speed today, for the 2024 review, we were requested to review the regulations under the Savings and Loan Code. Since the statutes had been repealed, we wholeheartedly supported and agreed that no Kansas consumer is harmed since the statutes no longer exist, but these regulations are absolutely ready for repeal. So based on that process, starting in 2024, we began the process of repealing the regulations. The final required approval on July 2nd of 2025, we received the Attorney General's approval to revoke the regulations, and that's why we are here today. With that being said, I will be more than happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions for Mr. Rayler? Looks like you're getting off easy. Well, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
And Mr. Solario? Oh, I did that right. Thank goodness. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Luis Solorio, and I am the Assistant General Counsel for the Office of the State Bank Commissioner. I'm here to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the two regulation changes that we're proposing. The first regulation change is under the Kansas Mortgage Business Act, KAR 17-24-4, and the second regulation is under the UCCC, the Uniform Consumer Credit Code, KSA 75-635. As a little background information, in 2024, the legislature moved all mortgages to be in the Kansas Mortgage Business Act. These regulation changes were effective January 1st, 2025. Previously, second mortgages and certain high-cost mortgages were in the UCCC. First mortgages originated or serviced by mortgage companies have always been under the KMBA. Today we are proposing these two regulation changes for consistency purposes. No true substantive changes are being made by these modifications. I would like to focus on the record retention regulation under the KMBA. KAR 17-24-4. This regulation references repealed UCCC statutes that were moved to the KMBA. First, we removed the references to a UCCC statute that was repealed. In KAR 17-24-483. By removing this reference to the repeal statute, we will continue to allow automated valuation models on non-purchase money real estate transactions. Non-purchase real estate transactions include every mortgage except for the initial purchase. So this includes second mortgages and first mortgages that are refinanced. Without removing these repealed statutes, non-purchase mortgages must acquire a new appraisal if the tax assessor's evaluation was deemed to be inaccurate. Second, in KR 17-24 B1, we were replacing the UCCC statute with the KMBA statute. This regulation, this reg requires mortgage companies to retain a high to loan value notice. By statute, mortgage companies are required to provide the notice to the borrower, but not retain the notice. This change is necessary to verify mortgage companies are complying with state law. We also made changes to this regulation to remove specific federal disclosures and replace it with the general verification of federal law. Our examiners already verify compliance with federal law, and references to specific requirements are not necessary. Finally, we removed some burdensome record retention requirements for mortgage servicers that are not checked during our examination process. The added language in KSA 17-24-4C reflects a much more scaled down record retention requirement for mortgage servicers. They will no longer be required to comply with KAR 17-24-4A and B. Our second regulation is KAR 75-6-35 under the Consumer Credit Code. This regulation currently references licensees that are engaged in loans secured by real property. As stated before, these loans move to the KMBA. Under KSA 16A-2-302, each supervised lender must maintain sufficient net worth as determined by the administrator. Instead of repealing this regulation, we modified it to state what the administrator determined to be sufficient for net worth for supervised lenders. Over the past couple of years, lenders have faced stress due to higher interest rates, resulting in less loan origination. This regulation will help identify lenders facing financial stress earlier, thus allowing us to take action to ensure Kansans are not harmed by struggling supervised lenders. Thank you for allowing me to provide testimony on these two regulation changes, and I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions on this? Oh, good, because I have some too. Ladies first. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at 75-6-35, which is the requirement for maintaining a positive net worth, but the wording has been added to say the administrator may issue an exception to this positive net worth requirement. So then, why would we have that in there if right now the idea is to have a positive net worth? If the administrator can simply say, well, you don't need that, what are we asking?
Yes, thank you for the question. That is a great question. In part is because there are other safeguards. There's a bond that is required by the licensee as well. Sometimes when there's issues that occur, there could be some negotiations with the commissioner, and the commissioner might deem that that bond sufficiently protects the Kansas consumer.
So I appreciate that comment, but then I would prefer that the requirement said the administrator may issue an exception to this positive net worth if a bond or other security exists. So I mean, if you have a reason, it seems like it would be helpful to state that. So those are just my comments about that.
All right, thank you very much. Senator Thompson.
Thank you. And kind of dovetailing on Senator Francisco's, if you have assets exceed liabilities by $1, you've got a positive net worth. And it is a little bit concerning that, it's just opening the door to, maybe some lenders that aren't quite as stable as we'd like. So I agree, maybe we ought to specify that. The other on the reporting requirements, it looks like we're just substantially turning it over to the feds and abdicating all Kansas control on the reporting requirements. Am I correct in that assumption?
Thank you for the question, Senator. No, the requirements, our examiners review federal compliance as well, and we already have statutory authority for that. This is just we're making more general federal requirements, or saying that we're going to be they're going to have to comply with general federal requirements, but we already look at certain disclosures that are required by Reg Z, RESPA, and so we wouldn't be handing it over to the feds. It'll be something that our examiners will continue doing so.
And maybe because you're striking a whole lot of language on there that was required before. Is the federal language substantially similar in what they require?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have a question, and I know that this is not your responsibility as the bank commissioner. However, every time I see in any of your regulations that, you have to have an appraisal done, you have to have this done, do you know how hard it is to get an appraiser?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. That's exactly why we're trying to make this change, or we're making this change, because the automated valuation models are less expensive and are still reliable, and we're giving the industry another option that is not as burdensome.
Okay. What, other than lessening things for us, which I thank you very much, however, what have you done to talk to the Board of Appraisals to try to help mitigate this problem?
I personally don't have any, have had any communications with the Board of Appraisals, but I would also ask our general counsel or anybody else that might have some knowledge of that. So,
Okay. Mr. Rayler? I know you've already introduced yourself. Please reintroduce yourself for those online.
Yes, Brock Rayler, General Counsel, Office of State Bank Commissioner. Specifically with this regulation, I will admit that we have not approached the board again. We have spoken to the board on previous regulation changes. But again, this is actually something that's already been in place back when mortgages were regulated under the UCCC, and all we're doing is keeping the same statute that applied in the UCCC to the Kansas Mortgage Business Act. And I'm sorry, UCCC stands for Uniform Consumer Credit Code. My apologies. So in effect, although it is technically new language under the Kansas Mortgage Business Act, this has actually already been in place for these types of mortgages when they were regulated under the Uniform Consumer Credit Code.
Okay, well, that begs another question. How many people have you consulted that are being affected by this, whether it's mortgage lenders, or have you asked for some feedback? You obviously haven't talked to the appraisers, and you're sort of taking some of their job away, which, thank you. But I just wonder who you have spoken to.
We have opened this up for comment, and we have not received any comments at this point. Our intent here is to move a regulation that was applicable under the Uniform Consumer Credit Code to the Kansas Mortgage Business Act. And the changes that we're making, we actually feel are non-substantive, other than adding the new language to the Kansas Mortgage Business Act that was already in place under the Uniform Consumer Credit Code.
Okay, well, I guess you don't have to talk to anybody if you're just sort of tweaking things. It doesn't matter. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Does anyone else have a question? If not, thank you for being here. Thank you for being at committee. And
Thank you, Madam
welcome.
Chair.
All right. Then we will move along, and we will have the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks, Christopher Kennedy. That doesn't look like you don't.
That would be my name.
All right, there you go. Welcome to committee, and introduce yourself, and please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Christopher Kennedy, and I'm the Secretary for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for having me here today, and it is a privilege and a pleasure. Before I begin, I'd like to say, in my career, I've worked on a variety of good projects or products for our citizens as it pertains to fish and wildlife. Any of the best projects that I worked on faced intense scrutiny from a variety of perspectives. And so I'd just like to say I welcome that scrutiny. I think it makes our products better for our citizens, both internal scrutiny and external. I think it's a necessary part of just being a public servant. Our entire agency is responsible to the people of Kansas, and we must remain accountable when we formulate these regulations. In that spirit, I look forward to open, clear communication and constructive criticism as we work with this committee, both now and in the future. Unlike other agencies that come before this committee, I'm obligated to work with the Kansas Wildlife and Parks Commission when making our regulations. Every regulation from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks that you hear has been vetted by this bipartisan commission in open meetings with multiple opportunities for public comment. I know that those of you on this committee are familiar with the promulgating process for regulations, but for the benefit of the public and that are here and anyone watching today's meeting, I'll attempt to simplify with a somewhat complex process because it differs from other state agencies. As Secretary, I propose a regulation at a meeting with the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks Commission. It is then workshopped at these public commission meetings, which are held across the state, where members of the public can voice their opinion on proposed regulations. Once the commission has thoroughly vetted the proposed regulation, it takes a preliminary informal vote to see if there is sufficient support on the commission to adopt these proposed regulations. We do this because the commission holds the ultimate authority to adopt, change, or reject the proposed regulation. A majority vote in favor of the regulation will begin the promulgation process. Following initial approval by the commission, my agency's legal counsel guides the regulation through multiple stages for review by other agencies, beginning with the Department of Administration, moving to the Attorney General, and ending with the Office of Budget. Of course, if an economic statement or impact statement of the proposed regulation would impose more than a $1 million over the first 5 years of its implementation, we are required to seek legislative ratification of the regulation before it can move forward. Assuming that the regulation has a smaller economic impact, the Secretary of State publishes notice of the public hearing at which the commission will formally vote on that proposed regulation. This notice period is crucial as it allows the public to review the proposed regulation and provide their feedback before a final decision is made. Before that vote, this joint legislative committee has the opportunity to review the proposed regulations and provide input. The regulation then returns to the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks Commission for a public hearing and a formal roll call vote. If the commission approves the regulation, the vote is certified to the Secretary of State, who publishes the final version of the regulation to the Kansas Register. The effective date of the regulation is 10 days after that publication. Wanted to go back. My PowerPoint was advancing a little bit faster than I was. The real reason that I'm here today is to talk about the many steps that our agency goes through before I ever even propose a regulation. This process underscores my commitment to transparency and accountability. The Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks must rely on data and scientific analysis in its decision-making process. Any regulations that I propose must stand on a three-legged stool of data: biological data, sociological data, and economic data. The biological data is crucial when making regulations about fish and wildlife. We must always consider the biological implications first. I always say that fish and wildlife can't speak. It is our job to speak for them. And that's why we consider them first. Whether it's looking at population trends, threats from disease, or habitat needs, wildlife belongs to the residents of Kansas, and we have a duty to keep them healthy, not just now, but long into the future. So when I make my decisions or when I work with our staff to create regulations, we're not just thinking about us in this room, the public, you all on this committee. I'm making an attempt to think about your grandchildren and their ability to partake in these resources in the future. Listening to the public about what they need to have a safe and meaningful outdoor experience is an essential part of our decision-making process. Because the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks provides services directly to the public and that we are funded by fees that they pay, we must consult with Kansans. That's where our sociological data comes in. We gather information in a variety of ways, including monitoring deer vehicle accidents, reports on crop damage, and implementing a variety of surveys to garner additional public input. Economic data is also considered, such as new sources of revenue or discounts for seniors that directly impact the agency's budget. It can be much more difficult for us to assess the broader economic impacts, but we do our best to understand the full economic picture and how our regulations impact local communities. To ensure that we're not only proposing regulations that are truly necessary, I have implemented a new, more rigorous internal process to justify our regulation proposals. Admittedly, you have continued to see some regulations that were initially promulgated before I came to the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks in 2024. However, I have directed my staff that all new wildlife and parks regulations will adhere to this process, which I'm about to describe to you. First step is identifying the regulation. First, a new regulation or amendment to an existing one is identified by a formal agency committee, working group, staff biologists, the Wildlife and Parks Commission, or even a member of the public. We then draft a highly detailed memorandum to detail the proposal. Again, first and foremost is the biological or conservation considerations for the proposed change, followed by understanding how the public will receive it and its economic impact. As required by law, we then assess the direct compliance costs by first looking at the data that we can regularly collect, such as the number of licensed sold, and then incorporate all reasonably accessible economic data. We then begin a series of comprehensive internal reviews, starting with our law enforcement. Our law enforcement review panel reviews the proposed regulation. If the proposal affects a specific location, such as limits on the number of fish that can be taken at a particular lake, we also ensure that the local law enforcement officer is consulted. consulted. I think this is absolutely necessary, as they need to be able to weigh in on the enforceability of the regulations that we propose. All of that information is documented in the memo as well. Next, the next level, that proposed regulation will go to our division director, our deputy secretary of operation, that now includes law enforcement concerns and the economic impact. This leadership opinion is also documented. We then proceed to a detailed internal presentation that explains and justifies the proposal. This is presented to our Regulation Review Committee. That includes me as secretary, our chief counsel, our deputy secretary of operations, my chief of staff, and any other staff that I deem necessary to be on that committee. If this group initially approves moving forward with the proposed regulation, it is placed on the agenda of an upcoming Kansas Wildlife and Parks Commission meeting. And I only move forward and officially propose a regulation if we have satisfied our duty of justification at each of these 3 stages. So as you think about how we create regulations with the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, what you see on the screen now is, on the bottom half, is the promulgation process, which you all are very aware of. But I wanted the committee to be of the rigorous steps that the agency is now taking in addition to those steps. And it would, this graph that you see here would be more representative of the process that our regulations go through prior to being submitted. Thank you for the opportunity to present this process to you. I look forward to working with you all in the future, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there any questions? Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation. Your proposals, I'm sorry, I missed it. Are they just seeking the okay to implement proposals, or are you looking at actual legislation?
These proposals we're looking forward to your input on the regulations that we're proposing. And for today, I mean, this is just potential regulations that we'd like to move forward with.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. I'm going back to the last meeting, and there were a couple of questions that I had. First off, I'm looking at the 3-legged stool here, graphic, and under sociological, that was really all the information we received with regards to the crappie reduction. And when asked about biological, we didn't get anything on that. So that was a little frustrating. Do you have more that can be shared with the committee?
Absolutely. I've got an extensive fisheries career, and so we've got some fee regulations that we'd like to talk about today, and I plan to discuss those here in detail after we get done with the questions about the 3-legged stool.
Very good.
Or anything I've said thus far.
And if I could continue one more. There are 3 legs on this, but I only have 2 questions. With regard to the economic, last meeting I requested information regarding the revenue generated by trout licenses versus the import costs for foreign trout, or non-indigenous trout. They're probably not foreign. But anyway, do you have that information available?
Yes, that information should be within your packet.
Oh, okay, very good.
It's titled, it was written by our fisheries director, Brian Sowers.
There it is. Yes, indeed.
And so you've got those graphs there that demonstrate the cost. It shows the trends over time, how the costs have increased. I mean, the reality is that essentially since 2010, costs for producing fish has dramatically increased.
Sure.
Increases in gas, increases in feed, electricity. Those costs have resulted in, those farmers selling those trout at a higher cost. Right. They are not native to the state.
Right.
However, they are raised in the United States. In fact, most of our trout are coming from Missouri.
Sure.
These are cold water species, and so you have to have springs in order to raise those fish, and they have that in Missouri. So we purchase our trout from private fish farmers in Missouri.
Okay. I'm still real speculative about buying things to then have people fish for, but I'll look at the economic impact part of it, and that's really where my major concern lies, other than philosophic.
I'd be happy to answer any philosophical questions you have about the program.
Very good.
And also, I think our fisheries director did a really good job of demonstrating through graphs the data that we have on the economic reasons of why we need this regulation change. I'll let you all finish giving me questions about what I've said thus far. Do we have any other questions? And then we'll get more into the trout discussion just here following after the remainder of the questions.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Representative.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Yes, I do know that. We have Senator Tyson has one on WebEx. Senator Tyson. Just, are you muted or? Did your question get answered, Senator?
No, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. I do have a couple of questions, actually. You mentioned that you and staff work on rules and regulations, but you did not mention the commission. Why don't you allow the commission to be a part of that process?
No, that's not necessarily true, Senator. Well, in the beginning of the presentation, the commission always has the ability to give me recommendations on what regulations they would like to see move forward. And I think one of the regulations you'll hear today is a regulation that was prompted by one of our commissioners. And so I'm always happy. I think that is what the whole purpose of the commission is for, to help advise the department on the public opinion of our regulations that we would like to propose. I have every intent of working with our commission to move regulations forward. As I stated, they can always, by a vote, prompt me to create a regulation. They can come to me individually and ask me about a regulation, and I'm always open to discuss it. And we have a series of meetings commission meetings where we'll discuss those options and allow all the commissioners to give a full voice to whatever is being proposed, and also give the public an opportunity to give comment as well.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, and Mr. Secretary, again, that is not how the commission feels. In fact, a couple members approached us on legislation last year to allow them to introduce rules and regs. So I'm glad you're on record saying that you are working with them and willing to listen to them.
Absolutely. I didn't mean to cut you off, but even after that bill did not go through, I introduced a new policy within our commission that allows them to do that very thing. And to kind of ease any of our commissioners' fears about my willingness to pursue or to investigate potential regulations that they bring forward.
Okay, and a follow-up, Madam Chairman, is the you talked about the scientific data to make decisions, but as Representative Sutton stated last meeting, that was completely the opposite. There was no scientific data to back up the rules and regs proposal that was being changed. So I hope going forward that we will see that data. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Absolutely. I apologize for any misunderstandings that may have occurred at that last meeting. But I think the biological implications for trout are very minimal. And they are, the trout regulations, the trout program are truly driven by what the public wants. And the reason the biological implications are minimal is that, yes, as Representative Sutton mentioned, this is an exotic species, but it is a cold water species. And so these species of fish that we stock generally only are living from when we have colder water temperatures. So we stock these fish in November. These fish live until the water temperatures reach about 65 to 68 degrees, and then they die. And so the biological implications or impacts that this stocking could have on native fish communities or on our fish communities that reside in our reservoirs are very minimal.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to make sure that I'm understanding the proposal process as you explained it, when you talked about a regulation being identified, I think you mentioned that could be identified by a biologist, by the agency, by a member of the commission, or by a member of the public.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So that's the point, starting this process, where there's opportunity for involvement across Kansas.
Correct.
Yes, Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate your comments so far, Commissioner. The one question I had, just starting in sort of your initial commentary or in the what we have in the packet here, is on the regulations on the economic impact has always been, to me, kind of a weak point in your department's analysis, and I don't quite get why in the KAR 115259 on the changes in deer permits that you only allocate the change in revenue and tax revenue, for your department, rather than seeing that if you had, surely there is industry data on, deer hunters, per day or per, animal that they shoot, on their total hunting, adventure, how much they spend. And that if we're reducing deer permits in one area, it's going to have an economic impact in just fewer people going hunting. Of course, some of them come from out of state, maybe many of them come from out of state. And I'm a little surprised that you folks kind of beg off on just saying, well, it's individuals' decisions and there's no way to guess on the economic impact outside of tax change. And can you maybe elaborate why? Have you tried to find industry data and you just can't, or what?
Absolutely. We're a science-based agency, and so we like to rely on the best data that we can obtain at that time. Keep in mind, within the Kansas Department of Wildlife, we have excellent biologists, managers, researchers that are used to looking at the economic impact as it pertains to us internally. This is a new law that we are doing our best to abide by, but we don't have economists on staff to help us really dig out the details on how it truly could potentially impact local communities. That doesn't mean that we still aren't trying. There's various, as you mentioned, a variety of research that we can tap into, national research that we can tap into to help look at what that potential economic impact could be. We've also been in discussions with the Department of Commerce, to talk about potential ways that we could develop contracts to work with universities to garner that economic data in the future. And so I think in the future, you'll see us taking that request very seriously. And we'll definitely provide you with the best information that we have in the moment. But I think you could look forward to us improving our ability to respond to questions in regards to how our regulations impact the economy and how it impacts communities overall in the future.
If I could follow up. No, indeed, it's not like we're needing something of just incredible depth and whatever, but just there are, just like the tourism department has, visitors to Kansas on average spend X amount per day. I'm I would think it wouldn't be too hard a bar for you folks to reach, and I appreciate your indication that you're going to try in the future.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. There are several agencies, whether it's the National Shooting Sports Foundation or other agencies, have a pretty good breakdown of what the average hunter or sportsman spends per day, not just in Kansas, but when they travel. I think that'd be pretty easy to figure out. But one of the questions I want to ask you, at the end of last session, there was a big blow-up with trying to limit out-of-state duck hunters to Kansas. What's your position on that today?
Be happy to talk to you more about that in the future as well. My first obligation is, since we're talking about ducks, in this situation, is the behavior of the ducks. And there is, I'm just going to be open and honest with this committee. There is a resistance to adding additional public lands to the state to provide these opportunities. We have tried to impact that or better that by, it wasn't that we were so much trying to limit non-residents from coming to the state, but we wanted to spread that hunting pressure out and give our residents an opportunity to utilize the lands here in the state as well. What became, or is what is really concerning to me, is that anytime our human behaviors are impacting the way species behave, it should be a red flag to us. We're altering the behavior of the critter itself, and that is a warning that we need to get involved to normalize that behavior once again. The real problem is that we are last in the nation for huntable public lands. I don't know if you all are aware of that. Dead last. It's surprising to me that we have such a resistance to adding additional public lands with us being last in the nation. I mentioned earlier that I'm doing my very best to ensure that your grandkids have resources to hunt in the future or fish in the future and places to go. It's an intricate part of, we are actually controlling how people engage in the outdoors by the amount of access that they have to it. I think about myself and how I've moved across the country and how my engagement with the outdoors changed as I moved based on what was available to me. If we want to preserve this awesome tradition of duck hunting, in the state of Kansas, we need to be thinking about ways that we can do that. That regulation that you mentioned was the first attempt at that, I think, to resolve those issues, but I don't think we still can't ignore the real issue. And that is the reality that we do not have enough public lands to go around the state to support our residents and non-residents alike. And so I look forward to having more discussions in the future in this building and with the public about how do we alleviate some of those issues. Because I don't want to see us turn to where Europe was before the United States was created. For those of you that are not aware, you had to be a king or very rich to hunt in Europe prior to the United States. That philosophy influenced a North American model that for conservation that all conservation agencies across the nation ascribe to. And it's all about maintaining hunting and fishing as a right and ensuring that we have adequate opportunities for our public to participate in those outdoor activities.
Madam Chairman, you're correctly right. Kansas is 97 or 98% privately owned, but I think you could have a better outreach, maybe trying to work with some of the landowners to play ball with you. The thing that frustrates me is, just like Kerwin filled back up, ducks follow the water. And sometimes it is kind of nestled in northeast, or this part of the state. A lot of time it's out by, the Cheyenne Bottoms. And it frustrates me that the waterfowl is hunted from Canada clear around the world. They don't belong to Kansas. The ducks are moving on. And I hate to see somebody, as the governor would say, when you restrict people coming here to hunt, it's a big smack to our tourism. So I'm always concerned when we're always trying to close the door on one section of our hunters. So I thank you.
Thank you too, Representative. I appreciate your comments and look forward to working with you in the future to kind of resolve those issues, because it is a delicate balance that we're trying to strike between our non-residents and our residents and our hunters and anglers alike. You're right. As we talk about migratory waterfowl, they don't really belong to us. They don't. Our ducks don't abide by our regulatory or political boundaries. And that's what necessitates our agency working with other agencies that are in that migratory flyway to try to improve habitat. And so we've got to, in the case of waterfowl, we definitely have to look very broad. And I mean, it's even as broad as far as how ducks are being managed in Canada if we want to maintain the healthy duck populations that migrate through Kansas. So I definitely appreciate your comments. And like I said, I look forward to working towards better solutions on how we can accommodate all sides. It is my objective to think about the wildlife first, but I'm also thinking about the many individuals that enjoy these resources that we have to offer, whether they be resident or those that are out of state as well.
Senator Tyson, you have another question or two.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I do. Kansans are paying exorbitantly high property taxes right now. Why would you want to take more property off the tax rolls and increase this burden to them? In your balancing act, I hope that you consider this, because that is a major issue for our constituents.
I would agree with you, and when I investigated it within the agency since I've been here, I was pleased to find out that we're not mandated to pay taxes on the public land that we manage, but we voluntarily do it. And so, in order to truly address that very concern that you have, we don't want to take funding away from the counties that are doing their best to manage those areas, and so we voluntarily do that.
So if I may, Madam Chairman, what taxpayer money are you using to pay property taxes?
We don't use taxes to pay taxes. We are funded by fees within the agency, and so we would utilize our fees that are collected through our permits for wildlife or for fishing. And so
Well, some people consider a fee a tax.
Well, a tax is something that you don't necessarily have the choice to pay. Our constituents, our public can choose whether they would like to pay for a fishing license or a hunting license.
Well, Madam Chairman, that raises major concern for myself and others, I'm sure. We've been trying to get the seniors, and Representative Corbett's worked on several programs to allow people access to hunting and fishing, and here we are charging fees to pay off property taxes. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I do have a question.
Yes, Madam Chair.
When you said that we don't have economists, we don't have the accountants to do all this checking of economic impacts, Representative Wagner was correct. The tourism department does it all the time, and they are a member of the Kansas state government. So you can utilize them without paying for someone else to do that. So you don't have to go to schools and you don't have to go anywhere else. They can give you an idea of how much this costs other people.
They definitely can give us a better idea, and as I mentioned earlier, I've had meetings over at Commerce to address that very thing. I think you can look forward to in the future us providing a much more comprehensive economic package. I would ask for a little bit of leniency. It is new to the agency. I think that law was being enacted as soon as I walked in the door, and so the agency was not fully prepared to answer those questions at that time. But I do think, you know, having universities like for our parks, for instance, I won't call the university because I can't remember it offhand, but they did a study for us where they looked at what was the economic impact of having our parks across the state. So as we dive into those very specific questions, whether it pertains to parks or whether it pertains to our hunters and our anglers and how they impact local communities, sometimes that does require a higher level of detail that I think we can work with universities to obtain that information in some cases.
When were you confirmed, sir?
It's a good question. It lasted over a year. In 2025, yes, ma'am. I was fully confirmed earlier this year.
Earlier this year.
Yes, ma'am.
There was also a bill that wanted to say that Wildlife and Parks doesn't have to figure out how much things economically cost. It's too hard. And I fought my level best to stop that bill. So far, and I'd like to see movement, but I'd like to see that Wildlife and Parks wants to play nice with other people because all the agencies have the same rule to follow. And we were getting rules and regs with zero economic impact, which necessitated this bill in order to force people to look at what they were doing and how much they were costing the state of Kansas citizens. So you got a lot of work to do.
I think that's true on a variety of fronts.
Okay.
I cannot defend or, you know, what happened prior to me. I think when I initially, within a month, you all heard from one of our former attorneys, and that discussion did not go well. But I cannot account for the way previous administrations engaged with this committee and the legislature. The reality is, in order to have good fish and wildlife populations across the state, as secretary, I have to be able to work across a variety of committees and parties. And I'm prepared to do that. And I think the economic aspect of it is one that has not traditionally been looked at within conservation rules and regulations, but it doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. So all I can say is, you know, for me going forward, I believe in transparency. I think if you all have questions about the economic impact of our regulations, we have an obligation to try to do the best we can to give you the information that we have at hand. The first, I think it was on fire extinguishers, you all may remember, where that initially came up. And I was rather disappointed after seeing that particular hearing, not with you all, but more about with the way we performed, because that was an easy one to assess, in my opinion. And it was something that we could have assessed with our data internally. So like I said, I cannot really speak to what happened previously, but I can talk about what our intention is going forward and how we'd like to cooperate.
Okay, thank you. Representative Carmichael.
Thank Thank you, Madam Chair. The good news is I think most of my specific inquiries have been covered by other members of the committee, but I do want to make sure that I understand two things. And I'm sorry, it's kind of hard for us to see each other. That's the joy of being the ranking member, is that you generally see the staff and not the conferee. But I hope people understand. I mean, you and I spent some quality time on the geological survey tour, and that led to us having a telephone or a Zoom call or so on, and I know we're going to continue some of those discussions. And I can tell you and the committee that your two predecessors have been friends of mine. I've got along fine with both of those guys. But I think you're a breath of fresh air at the agency. I'm pleased, honestly, with what I have seen. If the two things we've talked about here today are both very important to my constituents because I represent an urban district, city kids. And the trout permit, the trout situation, 20, 30 years ago, maybe more when that started, I thought, why in the world are they putting trout in Kansas streams or ponds? They're just gonna die. And that's true. But what I didn't understand is it would provide opportunities for kids to fish at Sedgwick County Park just outside my district, and they can literally ride their bicycle over there. Now, they have to have a trout permit because the program, as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the program has to pay for itself. Is that right?
When the program was first initiated in 1990, that was the original intent, that the program would pay for itself. It was piloted in Wichita, and it received raving reviews in Wichita, and that, previous administrations decided to continue to expand the program. That trend was not something that was just noted here in Kansas either. I had the privilege of starting trout programs in Missouri, where I came from, and there's just raving reviews about that trout program, mainly because that particular season it's an outdoor lull. People have been indoors all winter long. They're itching to get outdoors and to do something, especially those that don't hunt but maybe like to fish. And this gives them an opportunity to get out in a time of year when there's not a whole lot of other things going on. And so, yes, the children love it. Excellent opportunity to introduce kids to the art of trout fishing. And I will also say trout fishermen are probably the most vocal group of anglers you'll find, not just in the state, but also in the country. And they've as these programs have expanded across the nation, those groups have been highly favorable about those programs.
Well, I don't want to stay at it because we've been on this one for quite a while. But I just want to make sure you understand and my fellow committee members understand that it's important for people in my district that urban kids have a chance to go fish and have a chance to go fish something they're likely to catch some. That's important. The second thing has to do, of course, with out-of-state deer permits that we've been talking about. And I absolutely share Senator Tyson's concerns, and I know Ken Corbett's concerns as well, that there are people who make their living because of deer season. And I can tell you I've spent a lot of money on the night before opening day of deer season in towns where it's one of their biggest businesses of the year, maybe bigger than Christmas as far as what they sell. I don't want to kill that golden goose, but Mr. Secretary, I want you to understand that I want to make sure Kansas kids have a place to hunt for free and that they have the opportunity to get their first deer, even if they can't afford to hunt on a private preserve. And I know from talking with you that you understand how important that is to wildlife, to the whole scheme is that we have more kids able to hunt and more kids able to fish. And honestly, if I had to choose between Nebraska pheasant hunters and kids hunting pheasant in north central Kansas, I'll choose the kids to hunt in north central Kansas, just like I did when I was a boy. So I appreciate you being here, sir.
Thank you. And I really appreciate your comments because things certainly have changed. When we were kids, we could go to the neighbor's farm, and they would let us hunt. That no longer exists. We've tried to accommodate for the lack of public hunting opportunities with our WeHaw programs, which I have our wildlife director Jake George here, who's much more apt and capable of talking about those programs than even I am. But we did that in order to provide more of that opportunity. But now with so many leasing land, it has become a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge here in the state of Kansas. And I certainly empathize with your thoughts about the youth. I've heard even conversations with Representative Corbett about that as well, and how important youth are to me, and we've even cooperated on a couple of youth programs this past year. And so I'd certainly appreciate, I just want to say I appreciate those comments, and that's definitely at the forefront of my mind.
All right, Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I believe it was back when maybe Steve Williams, if that's his name, was Secretary of Wildlife and Parks. He had a pretty good program lined up to where on the website or somewhere there was an 800 number where he had a list of landowners that wanted hunters, and then the other they could match each other up, or at least have a reference to go. I mean, there's 45 million acres privately owned. It's just silly that you guys could be the gatekeeper and try to marry those two together and make things a little better for, like you say, for the kids to come and hunt. And even back then, I think a lot of landowners, if they could just sit down and meet you or talk to you, but when you're out there doing your walk-in hunting, ask the rest of the neighbors, or find out, or go through Farm Bureau or KLA. I think you'd pick up millions of acres of opportunity if we could just find the right verbiage to get stuff going for the kids.
I agree. I think that does, it's something to be investigated, because even that comes at a cost, right? I mean, those landowners get a variety of services from our biologists, helping them improve their land. They also get a tax break if they enroll their property, and so there's still a balancing act there to play. I do have concerns. I'm looking at an agency that is very understaffed. And so as we talk about increasing opportunities, work, and I think Senator Carmichael, you might have said it, Representative Carmichael, I'm sorry, stated that, it's important that I lost my train of thought in the fact that I called you a senator instead of a representative. But it is at the forefront of my mind, and it is something that we're going to have to address in the very near future.
All right, thank you. We've got lots of questions
ma'am.
up here. Senator Fausto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to comment, Secretary Kennedy, I really appreciate your presentation today. Madam Chair, this has been one of the most informative hearings or information on wildlife and parks. In the past, Madam Chair, because I've served on this committee for a while, I've always kind of just considered wildlife and parks kind of rural, and I'm a city girl, so I never, but Madam Chair, I want to say, and Secretary, you've reminded me of my brother who was a couple of years older than I am. He's deceased. And I remember as a little girl, he would force me to go fishing with him. And, I actually still have his fishing poles and his whole fishing kit. Gear, there you go. And this has inspired me to maybe, go try that again. So thank you for the information. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate those comments. And I just want to remind the committee, it's not just fishing and hunting. We do have parks,
Yes.
which serves everybody. And whether you're rural or whether you're urban, you're a human. And you need the engagement in the outdoors to remain healthy, just putting it shortly.
All right. Thank you. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your informative presentation today, not only about the department, but also kind of your views and the philosophy you bring to the office and the department. Appreciate that. Also appreciate the discussion about the challenges that we face regarding, well, we need to have opportunity here in Kansas to hunt and fish and for public parks as well. And one of the challenges you mentioned in particular was not enough public lands. Well, I guess my question to you is, would the department then seek condemning private property to turn them into public lands? Or I would kind of...
No.
Excuse me?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I would kind of think, based on the discussion I've heard today, it would be more of a partnership. How do we get more private property owners to engage with our hunting and fishing community? I was concerned to hear you say that it doesn't exist anymore, that private property owners let others come and hunt and fish on their land. I would respectfully disagree. Our family has, in fact, had opportunity to hunt and fish on lands that we don't own that aren't public either. So, and I would think, like Representative Corbett had mentioned, if we can just get communication going between those who can help provide the opportunity and those who seek it, I think that might help solve some of the challenges. I know it comes with other costs, but I would hope that the department could be looking into some of those ways to get the communication going.
Okay.
I didn't really have a question, Madam Chair, other than to make sure that, as in any endeavor of government, that we don't have too much overreach and that the department is always responsive to its appropriate role in solving the problems it faces and respecting the citizens and residents of Kansas. So thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and then we have one last question and we'll move on. We have gotten a lot done with this. Senator Tyson, sorry to keep you waiting.
No, thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator Warren brought up I was going to ask the secretary that he statement that he said neighbors are no longer hunting on land that doesn't exist, and it absolutely does. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
All right, thank you. Let's move on. I'm not sure who's going to start. Is that Mr. DeBoer or?
No, which topic are we on now?
We're moving on to KAR 115-2-1, 115-4-4, the next thing on the agenda.
Yes, ma'am. And so I had intended on our fisheries director, Brian Sowers, to talk about KAR 115-2-1.
This is more about deer season. So if we
Okay.
could get someone to come up and you can certainly chime in as they go along, it might be nice.
I don't think I'll have any need to. We have our very
right.
accomplished Director of Wildlife, Jake George. Yeah, we're going into the deer. Who's going to talk about deer populations with you, or the deer regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Jake George. I'm the Wildlife Division Director for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. There are several regulations that I'm going to cover with you, and if it's all right, Madam Chair, I'll start with 115-4-4. That's the covers legal equipment and taking methods for big game. Big game, as defined, includes any antelope, deer, or elk. This regulation is reviewed periodically, necessarily for any potential modifications with respect to new equipment advancements, new technologies available to hunters to harvest big game. The currently proposed change to the regulation broadens the types of projectiles that may be used in muzzleloading firearms so that modern non-lead projectiles can legally be used if a hunter chooses to do so. It does not require them to use them. Lead projectiles will remain legal as well. So it's actually expanding the options that muzzleloader hunters have for the projectiles that they use in their firearms. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to stand for any questions at the appropriate time on that regulation.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Representative Corbett.
basically what I'm getting from this is not really, not much of really anything has changed from last year, correct?
With respect to the
Muzzleloader?
legal equipment?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only change is that we're striking lead from the muzzleloader there so that the way it was written before, there are now saboted solid copper alloy projectiles that can be used in muzzleloaders that the way the regulation was previously written could not legally be used. I don't think many people knew that, but this is really striking that so that they are now legal.
Okay, and like your lead balls are still permitted?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions on that? And wait, I'm sorry, I got up and got some water. So did we start on 115-2-1?
4-4, the Secretary was actually going to cover 2-1 on the fees, but we jumped ahead a bit, I think.
Okay, all right. All right, you may continue.
Okay. The next is 115-5-1, and if it would be all right, I'd like to cover that in conjunction with the last one on the agenda, which is 115-25-12. They both cover the same matter with respect to legal equipment and the season dates for the use of night vision or thermal optics for the harvest of coyotes. The proposed change.
Can you also tell us, in all of this, do you know what page we're looking at right now first, so that we're not flipping?
Yeah, I apologize, I don't have a copy of the testimony with me.
Well, these are
Or their
what you
packets.
sent for us to look at.
No, you're all right. This should be the full set of. Okay. Okay, I apologize, Madam Chair. We're on 115-5-1. They're not page numbered for me here, though. It's
Not
immediately
page numbered
following
at the top?
4-4.
These all of these are.
But it's per
Different purses
regulation.
per regulation, okay. All right,
I think it's the last one in our packet.
okay.
So there's two here that I'm discussing. One is 115-5-1, which is fur bearers and coyotes, legal equipment, taking methods, and general provisions. And the second is 115-25-12, which is coyotes and season dates. I believe 115-25-12 is the last one in the packet.
Yes.
So the proposed change was a commission rather than department-driven review. While there was not concern from a biological perspective from the potential increased harvest of coyotes, there were some concerns expressed by law enforcement staff given the potential for increased opportunities for poaching with the expansion of the night vision season, especially if it included any firearms deer season. We solicited public opinion on the matter through a variety of means, which included public listening sessions at about 3 different locations throughout the state, multiple opportunities for public input on this topic at commission meetings, as well as a survey of various constituent groups, which included night vision permit holders, traditional coyote hunters, deer permit holders, and landowners. The respondents to the survey were predominantly supportive of expanding the night vision coyote season. Based on the responses, as well as some of the general comments that were provided by the respondents, it was apparent that many viewed an increased level of coyote harvest favorably. Beyond that level of general agreement, there was a whole lot of variability in the responses from the survey for how the season dates should be changed. After working through the commission process that the secretary outlined earlier and receiving this additional public input, the changes that are currently identified represent an option which the commission indicated that they would be supportive of. The change extends the night vision coyote hunting season by approximately 3 months. The current season runs from January 1st through March 31st. These changes will allow hunters to use night vision hunting equipment from September 1st through March 31st now, with the exception of the firearm season for antlered deer. The change does also include a 3-year sunset provision, which would revert the season back to its prior dates of January 1 to March 31 if the provision is not later removed. With that, Madam Chair, I'd stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
Okay. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in 22, 23, and 24, I offered legislation that would put an end to what I refer to as night hunting, because I think it's dangerous. My bills didn't get any attention in the legislature, and so maybe I'm still the lone voice out there, and I just want you to understand. By the way, I've been promised that every coyote hunter in my district is going to vote against me. There's a lot of people who are going to vote against me. I understand that. But I just want to make it a record, at least from my perspective, whether it's those commissioners that had other thoughts or what you've learned in your surveys. I'm a lone voice here who thinks that night hunting is dangerous, and I wish we weren't expanding the season, but I understand you have other constituencies as well. So I understand why you're doing what you're doing, and I'm not going to try to stand in its way. I've learned my lesson. But I still don't think it's a good idea. I think it's really dangerous, not only from the standpoint of poaching, but from the standpoint of letting bullets fly in the middle of the night, in the dark, and I just don't think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
A question I have for you, I was always concerned about your nesting predators while we seem to have trouble with our turkey flocks and whatever. And I think you passed something that raccoons were, there was no season, or was it 12 months for that critter?
Yes.
Would that same animal be allowed to be harvested at the same period as the coyote? Because they're really that's how thick they are.
Under the current regulations, the only coyotes are the only ones that the night vision is legal equipment for, under current regulations.
What would be your concern about adding raccoons?
Part of it has to do with the methodology, treeing raccoons and shooting up into the air as opposed to shooting down towards something on the ground.
You're assuming it's in the air.
It potentially could be.
So I know but go ahead.
Yeah. Those are some of the concerns that have been expressed, but it is still something that's being discussed with staff and with the commission. So,
thanks.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and a follow-up to the representative's question regarding raccoons and coyotes. We're discussing 115-25-12, right?
correct.
That's part of what-
And 115.5-1, because they both required modifications to extend the season.
So appreciate that you got feedback and input from landowners and hunters and trappers. So raccoon season, I guess, is kind of year-round, and coyotes aren't. Are they both considered vermin, though?
Coyote is actually year-round.
Okay.
It's just the specific equipment type using the night vision and the thermals that has a
Has a
designated
limit.
season.
Okay, great. Thank you for clearing that up for me. I appreciate it.
Okay, are there any other questions? Did you have anything else that you were going to cover, sir?
I did.
Okay, I'm gonna take a step back, and I may be really picky, but I would like you all to follow what you gave us so that we can go page by page instead of hunting for a pretty good word for this, hunting for where you are and what you're in the proposals and all that you sent us. Those are like the last two, and so we have to comb through everything to find it. And I'd like to start at the beginning and get to the end, and it may make you go back and forth and talk, but I would appreciate that. It makes it just a little bit easier as we're in committee.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Would you like to go back to 2-1 then? The beginning?
Yes. That's the first one. Yes, the first one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christopher Kennedy, Secretary for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. If we look at, this regulation pertains to fees and registrations and registration and other charges. The first regulation refers to the discounted license for resident senior hunters and anglers between the ages of 65 and 74. And what we are proposing is to create a 5-year fishing license for $50, a 5-year hunting license for $50, and a 5-year combination hunting and fishing license for $90. The agency decided to pursue these new discounted rates in light of the legislative sunset of KSA 32-9-100, which offered a discounted combination hunting and fishing license for seniors. It's also being amended to remove fees for mussel fishing and dealers since the authority to harvest mussels lapsed in 2022 in KAR 115-17-9. The other fee increase pertains to the rainbow trout program here in the state. As we talked earlier, it's a cold water species. It will not survive in 99% of Kansas water bodies in May. Because of their low temperature tolerance, they currently cannot be efficiently hatched or grown in our warm water fish hatcheries. Therefore, we bid them out for purchase from cooler water facilities. We mentioned earlier that it was piloted, the program was piloted in the 1990s, showed high popularity among anglers and trout anglers. The program began in 1994 with the stipulation that we would have to generate the revenue to support the program, and then the trout permit was born. Some of the current challenges that we currently have are the trout prices have gone up exponentially 2 years ago, but really since 2015. The number of permits sold have stayed similar or even saw somewhat of a decrease, or what could be perceived as a decrease. We've got a variety of solutions that we can employ. All of this is the first one. One other, I think, thing to note, the program has been in existence for 25 years. We've only raised the fee for the trout stamp $10 in that 25-year period. I think if you all are interested in other things that we could do, there are other methods we could take. We could reduce the stocking rates. We could reduce the number of areas that we're stocking. We could look at, and as if this continues to be an issue, we could look at doing a delayed harvest on trout, which means they would have to catch and release up until a certain point of the year, which would stretch, each trout out a little bit further. But those are just some other potential solutions if this issue comes up in the future that we would try to employ.
All right, Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I found the information that you said was in there, so that's great. Thank you for providing that, Mr. Secretary. However, looking at it causes me some concern. The original goal of this program was to pay for itself, and I don't think, at least in the years listed here, it ever has. Did we ever waive that necessity, or how are we continuing the program when it has never met that criterion, as far as I can tell?
I think it was so popular that previous leaders decided to continue on with the program. There are other states that take a different tack, like they'll work with local communities and have the local communities pay for half of those trout, and then the agency pays for half. And so we currently right now utilize our wildlife fees, which are permit fees from fishing or from hunting, to supplement those costs for the trout currently.
Right. So what it amounts to is that you have to pay extra for a deer license so that we can continue paying for this program.
I would not say that you pay extra. The deer license fee would be the deer license fee, but as we administer those funds, our administration makes decisions on where the best place is to put those funds to maintain opportunities like these.
Or to maintain losing money. That's the point that I'm getting at there. How many other fees could be reduced if we weren't losing money on this one so dramatically? And that's rhetorical. I know there's not an answer to that right now, but I'm just, when I originally brought up the point last meeting, and why are we shipping things in, buying things to then allow people to hunt or fish? This program's not paying for itself, and maybe with the fee increase, it'll get closer. I'm hoping that's true. But if not, I'm wondering why we're doing this in the first place.
That's our job is to provide recreational opportunities for our citizens. This is one that 10,000 to 12,000 people in the state are very passionate about. And by our based on our surveys, have indicated that they would like us to continue providing that service.
And that covers the sociological leg of the stool, but I'm looking at the economic. Mm-hmm. And I don't see where it carries its weight. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to be clear, we're talking about 115-2-1, right?
Correct.
Okay, great. So regarding the resident senior hunting license for those 65 to 74 years old and the resident senior fishing license, I see that, and then there's a combination hunting and fishing license. So talking about the combination hunting and fishing license first for that age group, the cost of that was raised or proposed to be raised here in this regulation from $40 to $90. That's a pretty big increase if I'm reading the proposed regulation correctly. It's on page 6.
Right now, well,
and it goes from, currently it's a combination hunting and fishing license, a one-time purchase, and with the change it would be valid for only 5 years from age 65 to 74. So it's a couple of changes there and That's a 225% increase, I think.
Right now, this whole license issue came about because we used to have a law that allowed us to sell 10-year combination fishing and hunting license for Kansans 65 to 74. That sunsetted in 2020. We found out, well, I found out about that as soon as I came on board, and anglers and hunters were then forced, we only would have an annual license available for them. So annual hunting, annual fishing, annual combination for only 1 year. Those are $15 currently right now. And so if you are 65 or to 74, you would the only option you would have would be to pay annually a $15 fee. If you extrapolate that out over a 5-year time span, that's basically $75. And so this would really be a decrease in what we're currently charging our seniors to purchase their annual, their hunting and fishing license. Yes, it's over a 5-year time frame, but when you look at what we currently have, we're giving them a benefit, not increasing the cost.
And what's the benefit?
Well, if you currently,
You have to purchase it every year.
you would have to purchase it every year, which would give you a total cost over 5 years of $75. And what we're proposing here,
And now you're charging 90.
no, for both. That's for both the hunting and fishing. So you have a category for fishing, you have a category for hunting, and then you have a combination license for both.
So my question then would be, since that sunset in 2020, what has changed that the department can't retain the $40 pricing for senior lifetime combination hunting and fishing?
Is that referenced on here on page 6 as
Page
well?
6, yes. Why not propose
it's-
that regulation again?
It's for 1 year.
Well, where then are you getting the authority for what you're proposing on page 6? If you have authority to propose the change on page 6 as you have it, why not just re-propose what sunset in 2020?
Because it was created by the legislature. And I think there was a bill last year that was tied to the migratory waterfowl bill. I think Representative Corbett kind of championed that last year.
So maybe that's a revisor question, or if Representative can answer.
There has been some controversy or discussion about whether I just have the authority to re-implement that reg. And after legal review, my legal team found that I do not have the statutory authority, being that that was created through legislature.
Sure. So what authority do you have today to create this as proposed on page 6? And maybe that's a question for the revisor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As usual, per meetings, we create a document or a memorandum that gives the statutory authorities. It should be at the back of your packet. And this one, oh, excuse me, Jenna Moyer, Office of Revisor Statutes, my apologies. And then they would be on page 4 of that memorandum. And it gives the secretary authority to adopt fees and regulations subject to the following limitations. And then there's not a specific statutory authority for those specific to senior licenses. So I just gave you the fishing and hunting licenses with the maximum fee allowance for the combination hunting and fishing license and hunting licenses. And then the secretary also has just generic authority to adopt rules and regulations to implement, administer, and enforce the provisions of the wildlife and parks laws of this state. And I am not familiar with the lapsed law in regards to the 10-year licenses, but we're going to look into that and get back to you.
Thank you. So if this is just the general authority of the department, which it sounds like it is, why not just adopt how it was, a senior lifetime combination hunting and fishing license for $40? Why the increase?
I'll have to get back with you on that. So.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, but so what? He has his own authority to create whatever he wants.
Statute that authorizes a take-you specific authority to.
Yeah, that is.
Madam Chair, my name is Martin Board, Chief of Staff. It is our understanding, and we'll clarify this for you and follow up, that the specific statute that addresses the one that sunset gave special authority to go below what is already allowed by a different statute that says that we can only reduce a senior license by a certain percentage. I want to hesitate on what that percentage is, but to my recollection, that specific statute that did sunset was special, went above and beyond what another statute allowed us to do for senior licenses. But we will follow up and give you that.
All right, well, Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I hear what you're saying, and my complaint was I saw this. It happened to be a big news break that day when it happened. It said, effective at 3 o'clock today, there will be no longer senior lifetime licenses sold. And the ones they had will still be good. And that was in 2020. The seniors have been taking it in the shorts here for 5 years. You don't realize when the 65 to 75-year-old people, it's not like there are tons of life and hunting time left. And it frustrates me that you'd leave a significant portion of this state.
I intend to hunt for another 30 years.
Tell the senator on the left, no. But anyway, do you hear what I'm saying, Martin? And if you could just remove the sunset, and the bill that passed the Senate and the House simply said seniors 65 to 75, and it would be about $40.
Correct.
When you do the math.
So a couple of points. We didn't stop selling until we identified it this year. So from 2020 to 2025, when we identified that this was lapsed, we were still selling that license.
Nobody knew it.
Excuse me?
I mean, I never heard it on, when you put out a broadcast that will no longer be available, then you just keep that silent and sell them anyway.
Well, I would respectfully disagree. We had a press release that went out. It's been posted on our website, everything like that, indicating that those that had been sold would still be honored, but because statutorily we could not sell that, we had to stop. The other thing is we can't remove a sunset provision from a statute. We'd have to go through an entire legislative process to get a new statute established.
So just to follow up, Martin, if there was a legislative process, as it was last year, and it would happen to be signed by the governor, and we could remove the expiration dates, you would be okay with that?
If that is the will of the legislature, I believe we're making,
I'm more worried about the department than I am the legislature.
Would
the department fight that?
I'll let the secretary speak to that.
Good choice, Martin. We would evaluate it.
So while you're still there, if you can play with that senior bill and change the numbers in the years, could we look at the lifetime youth license, and as it was in the bill that passed the House and the Senate, 0 to 15 for $500? Could you live with that?
We will review it. I'd be happy to answer that question for you at a later date.
Thanks.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not remembering objections in our Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee to the changes in the senior license lifetime hunting. I don't remember objections that that you would have had or other people had. It was moving through.
Correct.
And it was a legislative decision to tie it with the other bill. And I think the veto only had to do with some objections about the hunting of waterfowl, which I had understood the Wildlife Commission had spent a lot of time trying to figure out a balance and had proposed.
4 years.
Mr. Secretary, hopefully, in the next session, wherever the bill ends up being introduced, I hope I have your back and for a little bit support for this for the seniors and the youth, and we'll talk later.
Absolutely.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the representative bringing up those questions. I just want to clarify that, again, while we're looking at the senior lifetime combination hunting and fishing license change as proposed by the department, until 2025, I suppose, it was $40, valid for 65 years of age and older. And the proposal from the department is valid for only 5 years, from 65 to 74. So in that 10-year time frame, if you will, what was prior was it would cost you $40 for your combination senior license. And with the change proposed by the department, you have to now spend $180, not $90 for that same 10-year time frame, right? Because you've got to buy your 5-year license for $90 twice now. So for our senior hunting and fishing population of folks, it goes from $40 to $180. And I would like some more information from the department. That is a tremendous increase, a one-time increase from, I guess now it would cost them well, let's see, $15 for a year, so $30 for a year for each of the hunting and fishing license times 10. So it might be cheaper than the year by year, but it's still a huge increase from the $40 for the lifetime. And what happens when you turn 75?
It's free.
It's free. Okay, that's the answer. Okay. But again, I would like some, when we're looking at the stool, this is a big economic change for our seniors who hunt and fish. And to the Representative Corbett's point, I'd like to see some help for our youth population too.
Senator Francisco, and then Representative Corbett again.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Tyson.
So my understanding after listening to this discussion is that the legislature had passed legislation to allow a reduction in the cost of these fees, because that was the legislative interest. But we put a sunset on that. The sunset came and passed, and we didn't do our job to reinstate something in the final days of this session when the two were combined. So all of a sudden, I'm understanding that these regulations now follow the current statute, and that there's not, and that the department doesn't have the ability to lower that until we change legislation. And that's what I understand they're going to be looking at to make sure that that is what's happening. Is that?
That is an accurate
Okay.
assessment.
Representative Corbett.
Before this ever process, it used to be in your department. Once you turn 65, the weapon license. That was kind of the common law when I had whatever school you want to look at, I think whatever you do, to try to keep more people, whether they're kids or seniors, in the game. I hope we can get that done. I see where we're at. It just seems like things that, just like you said, after the 75, they will need money. Well, the next secretary may say, well, 76, you need to hammer it again for $40. I would like to get this put to bed, and we will talk this session, but I think you're on top of it. But the thing that affects me right now is these people right coming up by their flying and fishing licenses this year may take a significant hit. Is that correct? If this goes through.
If it doesn't go through, they'll take a significant hit. They'll be forced to buy the annual license, which would be more than what we're proposing here.
Okay, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would ask the Secretary provide the committee with the amount of property taxes per county that the department pays and a breakdown as to what fees and or other revenue sources are used to pay those taxes, and if it's the total amount on taxes or if there is a window of discrepancy on that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Well, you know, they do have to charge more for many things so that they can pay for the trout stocking. So we do know that there are other things that they're trying to raise so that they can pay for that as well. Are there any other questions? All right, then we can move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Jake George. I'm the Wildlife Division Director for Kansas Wildlife and Parks. I believe I have two regulations left to cover with you, both of them dealing with deer. The first is 115.25.9, which covers open season bag limits and permits for deer. It sets the states for statewide and management unit specific deer seasons, specifications for obtaining certain permits, and it specifies the number of valid antlerless deer permits that a hunter may use within each deer management unit. Now, a little bit of background on those as far as deer management units and how we manage deer throughout the state. As a diverse state with respect to both population distribution of people and deer, as well as diversity in habitat types and land ownership patterns, deer management in Kansas necessitates that those decisions be made at a smaller scale than statewide. As such, Kansas is divided into 18 deer management units, which were established based on similar major habitat classifications. Our agency annually assesses and monitors deer populations within each management unit. Trends or changes in deer density over time within each unit, which are measured in deer per square mile, is one of the primary metrics that's considered when we're reviewing the desired level of harvest for a specific deer management unit. In general terms, what we're currently seeing, and this is very general, but is increasing deer density in the east and decreasing deer density in the west. Modifying the number of antlerless deer or does that are harvested within a unit is the most effective measure of population control and manipulation that we have. So put in the simplest of terms, again, very simple, but more does harvested equals less reproduction, which equals lower future population densities. Less does harvested equals more potential reproduction or higher future population densities. So if you remove a buck from the population, you harvest a buck, the does that buck would have bred will be bred by another buck. So you're not doing anything to decrease population, and those can increase exponentially if not kept in check with appropriate harvest. In addition to modifying the number of antlerless permits that are available within a given unit, this regulation also addresses the length or the duration of the extended antlerless only season, which is in January. The assumption is that an increased amount of time to harvest antlerless deer equates to increased opportunity, which creates the potential for additional harvest. As such, in management units where deer densities are either increasing towards or are at levels that are above those that are biologically or socially acceptable, the duration of the extended antlerless season is increased, and likewise, the season length may be shortened where densities are decreasing below desired levels. So whether with respect to the number of whitetail antlerless permits that are available or the duration of the extended antlerless only season, the changes that are outlined in this regulation today increase the opportunity for harvest within units where additional harvest is needed, primarily in the east, and decrease the opportunity for harvest in units where less harvest is desired, primarily in the west. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, are there any questions on this? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is there a Unit 10A? And I'm looking at the top of the page C where it talks about each unfilled, the third, each unfilled deer permit valid in Unit 10A, 11, 12. Or
Yes, Benny, there's also a Unit 19. There's some subunits within those, and those are like military installations or specific areas that we need to be able to call out separately from a management perspective. 19 is kind of the urban Kansas City area and overlays a couple of other management units.
So in this case, we're not going to be calling that out specifically anymore because we're just addressing 10.
The military subunits specifically are handled in the next one we'll talk about, which is 25-9A.
I have a question. Is there any economic impact about how things are, and we're obviously low, decreasing, somewhat stable. What is the economic impact on deer hunters there?
It varies. We haven't had a huge shift for many years in the number of non-resident permits that are available. And of course, with residents, the antlered deer permits are available over the counter. There has been a shift in where that harvest is allowed. So the non-residents have to specify a management unit that's their first choice, second, third, and an adjacent unit. And those are the ones that they're able to hunt. Residents are able to hunt statewide with their permits that are over the counter. So as far as where those non-residents are able to hunt, that does change based on how many permits are available within a given deer management unit and what that quota is for that year. So we have seen some shift where permits have moved towards the eastern part of the state as far as the limited permits for non-residents that are available, and away from the western part of the state where we're looking to decrease some of the harvest opportunity or where that opportunity has become limited by the resource.
All right. Representative Corbett.
On your deer permits, last year, how many non-resident unsuccessful do you think there might have been?
There was, give or take, about 10,000 unsuccessful.
Do you think if the residents are not stepping up and you still want to maintain your herd quality, and basically you don't guarantee anybody that buys a license to get a deer, why wouldn't you think about bumping the non-residents up a little bit? Because I know that just in the areas that I'm seeing that the buck-doe ratio is pretty overwhelming. You know what I'm saying? So would that solve some of your problems?
I don't believe that it would for a couple of reasons. One being that non-residents aren't coming here to harvest does, and that's really what we need them to do, as well as residents, especially in the eastern portion of the state, which is why you see the increase in the duration and the number of permits that are available for people to purchase in the eastern part of the state within those units. Doe harvest is what we need, and we get doe harvest at a lesser percentage from non-residents than we do from residents. But I'd like to see both groups increase the number of does that they're harvesting. The second is more the social component of it rather than the biological. We do get a lot of pushback given the number of non-residents as far as the ratio within the state from resident hunters, seen as competition within the Midwest, we are by far have the highest percentage of non-resident hunters. We're at about 25% of our hunters, deer hunters. The next closest to us is Nebraska at about 16%. If you look at other states in the Midwest, it's in the 4 to 8% range. So we're pretty high as far as the number of non-residents that we're already permitting in to utilize the resource.
So trying to harvest the does, so if, whether a resident or non-resident, whatever, if you had a kid's license, doe only, what would that permit be right now?
I would have to get back to you on that. I would have to look at the fee
But
rate
I'm
for it.
thinking that would be a good way for landowner relationship. They'd like to get rid of the does too, but just try to sell that to get the younger people out to participate. I think that would be a good move to help you solve the doe problems.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I was going to address too, you had mentioned under Steve Williams, the 800 number that we'd had. We don't have an 800 number anymore, but we do have an online database on the website where hunters who are interested in getting in contact with landowners for antlerless deer harvest can sign up, and landowners can now go out there and get a list for their county with name and contact information for everybody who's gone out there and signed up. So
If you have that, would you be able to make something like a JPEG so we could do a little social media for you and kind of spread the word for you to try to let these people hook up a little bit?
yeah, we can certainly talk with our public affairs folks. They're in the process of revamping our website at the moment, so there'll be some changes there too.
I think you can kind of pass this around through the legislature. I think you'll be surprised how many people might want to enjoy that.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? I don't see any. He might be kind of off the hot seat on that one.
I got one last one.
Okay.
Appreciate it. 115.25.9A. This sets the dates for the deer hunting seasons on those military subunits, which can differ from the statewide seasons. We work with the U.S. Department of Defense annually to determine the dates to allow deer hunting activities to occur on these military bases while trying to avoid conflict with their mission objectives. So parts of the base that are closed for training exercises when troops may be deployed, et cetera. So the proposed regulation changes do not impose any additional costs and will benefit both active duty service members as well as all hunters by permitting them to continue to harvest deer within these subunits, which some of them are rather large properties, during the times when they are accessible. With that, Madam Chair, I'd stand for any questions.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm looking, I'm just bringing this up because it doesn't seem fun for either the committee or for the department to have to go through regs and regulations every year. So some of these changes seem to be based just on dates, you know, changing from one date to another. And I'm just going to make the comment that you might look at the third Saturday in December through the third Sunday in December and not have to come back next year with change in dates, if that might work.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Francisco. We are actually having those discussions already. It's been difficult in the past to craft that more durable language for the dates because they do change so much on those on the military properties, given when training exercises and things of that nature are taking place. But we are going to work with them to see if we can find some durable language that would give them that flexibility still.
Okay. Seeing no further questions or comments, I think you're done.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Did you guys want to say anything else before you left, or can I just dismiss you as you're done for today? Okay, we will then move on to, believe David Anderson, Commissioner for Aging Services and former Hayes resident. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself for us.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is David Anderson, and I serve as the Commissioner for Aging Services at the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services. I understand you have my written testimony, so I won't read that, but I would like to emphasize a few key points from that testimony. First, the changes we're requesting will help older Kansans continue to age in place. The changes do not increase the cost to the state. These changes were requested by the provider network, in this case, the area agencies on aging. The changes will not negatively impact businesses, economic development, or local governments. The two changes that we are requesting are an increase to the maximum monthly expenditure per customer from $1,445 to $3,000, and an increase in the maximum expenditure for one-time services from $1,500 to $3,000. It is our understanding that these amounts have not been increased since 1994 and thus have not kept up with price increases and inflation. Our goal is to help the AAAs have increased flexibility to continue to help older Kansans age in place and avoid unnecessary nursing facility placements. Thank you for your consideration in this matter and your continued commitment to Kansas seniors. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have zero issue with raising the costs, but the payment levels, but I am concerned when you say that it's not going to have an impact. Does this mean that fewer people will be served?
So that's a possibility. I would point out that the current regulation did allow for a process by which a AAA could request to spend more than the existing levels, and that happened 20 times. That meant they had to fill out some paperwork, send it to the Aging Commission, had to go through our process and up to the Secretary for approval. So that was done 20 times. Each time it was approved by the Secretary.
Okay.
But by allowing this, that would not have had to have occurred, and thus there wouldn't have been a delay in the service provision.
Interesting. Okay. But you're saying that it is possible that further funding increases might be necessary if we're going to continue serving the entire population.
That's a possibility. KDED is not requesting any additional funding at this time.
At this time is the point I'm making there, yeah. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm understanding that these costs could also be covered by customer fees. So it may be that if a customer had the money to cover it, then that wouldn't change the number of customers that could be covered.
Yeah, so the Senior Care Act does require, there is a formula by which their self-pay is determined, but they do have to have some amount of payment for each of these. So it is not entirely paid through this fund.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you said this would benefit seniors, but then can you clarify for me in the income verification, are we considering everyone living in that household, or is this changing that to only consider the senior person receiving the services?
Yeah, I do believe it does include the number of people living in the household. The AAAs do that assessment. There's also an assessment that is done to look at activities of daily living. We're really trying to determine if there are supportive services that can be provided to help keep people living in their homes. But there is that formula that they have to provide information to the AAAs about their liquid assets that determines what their level of percentage of payment of the overall cost.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, are there any other questions? Did Ms. Anderson want to put any points in here? Did she want to speak at all? If not, yes, there you go. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Leslie Anderson, the Executive Director of the Kansas Association of Area Agencies on Aging and Disabilities. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak for a few moments. I just really quickly wanted to address one of the questions that you had asked, Senator. So when a person has a plan of care, they can combine services such as a one-time expenditure and personal care. So let's say the individual comes out of the hospital and now they have mobility issues. They need a lift chair. Their plan of care might already be at that $1,445 a month, but the lift chair can be anywhere from $700 to $1,200 a month. If they need a bariatric lift chair, that's up to $4,000. Okay, so what usually happens is the person who contributes to their plan of care requests that additional item, and if it is over the cost cap of the $1,445, permission must be given by the secretary, KDADS. So what they can do, however, is contribute like they do on a monthly basis to their plan of care, and then based upon additional needs, that might increase as well, but only for that particular item. Okay, so they don't keep on going on paying such as that amount that increased for that lift chair. It goes back down to the regular amount. Okay?
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I could say, happy birthday. Her birthday's August 5th, the same day as mine. Thank you.
Oh, then happy birthday to
Yeah.
both of you. There
Yes,
we
happy
go.
birthday.
Well, thank you to both of the Andersons for coming up and helping us, and thanks for being here. And if there aren't any more questions, we'll move on to the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. And he's been very patient, and I'm assuming he has a gun, so let's just be nice for a few minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Mike Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. We have two KARs. One is a modification to an existing KAR, and the second would be the creation of a new KAR. I believe you have my written testimony, so I won't belabor the points that are in there, but I would like to take just a moment to kind of explain the makeup of the commissioners of CPOST. They are mandated by statute, and I'll just kind of run down the list to give you an idea of who those are. The Director of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the Superintendent of the Highway Patrol, and then there are 3 sheriffs appointed to the commission by the governor, and those sheriffs are nominated by the Kansas Sheriff's Association. And the breakdown of those sheriffs are one sheriff is from a county of 50,000 or more population. The second sheriff is from a county of 10,000 to 50,000 population. The third sheriff is from a county of under 10,000. And then there are 3 chiefs of police. Those are nominated by the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police. And again, they are appointed by the governor. And those are chiefs from city of the first class, city of the second class, city of the third class. Then additionally, there is a training officer from a certified state or local training school. That individual is nominated by the Kansas Peace Officers Association. We also have a full-time commissioned law enforcement officer, and that can be from the state, the county, or local level, and that is nominated by the Fraternal Order of Police. The next to last member is a county or district attorney, nominated by the Kansas County or District Attorney Association. And then the final member is a member of the public who has no affiliation with law enforcement whatsoever, and they are selected by the governor. If it pleases the committee, I will address KAR 106-2-3 first, and then entertain any questions, and then move on to the second one. KAR 106-2-3, we are asking to add 2 additional definitions to the definition of unprofessional conduct. The first one would be there is a requirement that certified law enforcement officers self-report to CPOST anytime that they are arrested, convicted, or have any other interaction with a crime that would be a disqualifying event under an existing KSA. We are wanting to add that as a definition of unprofessional conduct to make it easier for the commission to take action when an officer does not self-report as they are supposed to. The second part that we are also adding, there are certain forms that agencies are required to submit to Kansas CPOS when they hire a new officer. We get what we call a demographic form that lets us know that they've hired an officer. It's got some information about their previous law enforcement training, if they had any, and different requirements to be certified as a law enforcement officer. The second part of the unprofessional conduct would be failure to submit those to CPOS would be a violation of the unprofessional conduct, KAR. That's all I have on that, so I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Are there any questions? We'll start all the way and come back. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just dealing with an issue very much like this with another board, and unprofessional conduct in that case, and I don't know if it's the same here, but carried with it, you know, exposure on a nationwide database where people, and you couldn't ever remove that black mark from your resume, so to speak. And so I have some concern, and I don't disagree with what you're saying here, that those things need to happen, but I do have some concern with lumping everything under unprofessional conduct. When we have an issue where they didn't file a report in a timely manner, and that's the same as, you know, extortion, as far as unprofessional conduct is concerned. Does that unprofessional conduct brand carry with them and limit future employment opportunities or change insurance requirements or anything along those lines?
That would completely depend on what the commission decides to do as far as the action they take for that violation. The commission has the authority to censor, reprimand, suspend, revoke a certification. So that would be up to the commission investigative committee, which would be the first step. And then once it gets to that point, if the commission does take action, the officer has the right to appeal that under CAPA. And then eventually, once it runs through the CAPA process, then it can actually go through the Kansas Judicial Review Act and end up in district court and theoretically all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right, if I could follow up just a little bit. So say an officer has an unprofessional conduct tag, what's the impact for future employment or anything along those lines?
Again, it would be dependent on what action the commission took. If the commission revokes the certification, then that would have a long-term impact on that officer's ability to attain a job, not only in the state of Kansas, but potentially in other agencies across the nation if he or she's revoked.
Right. See, and that's where I have a concern, where the offenses that are listed as unprofessional, some of them are heinous, absolutely. Maybe not filing a report in a timely manner doesn't really rise to that level, in my opinion, and I could be off base on this. I've never been in law enforcement. But it seems to me that that's an overly broad category that may carry with it stigma that aren't necessarily applicable.
Potentially. What I would caveat that with is the documentation on the second part of what we're wanting to add. That documentation allows us as CPOST to vet that officer so that we know that we're fielding the appropriate people in those positions and not letting somebody slip through the cracks that should not be a police officer or a law enforcement officer in the state of Kansas. And again, I'm a little biased because I've been in law enforcement basically my entire adult career, but this is one of the most sacred professions that we have in our society because we bestow on those officers the ability to take away our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The three things that were spelled out in the Declaration of Independence. And we give them that authority on an ongoing basis. So being able to get that information from the agencies, not only when they're first employed, but also when they separate or are terminated or are fired, for us as CPOs to fulfill our responsibilities under the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Act, we need to have the ability to make sure that those reports are getting submitted to us the way they're supposed to.
All right. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Faustigedo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mike Brown. And you've been here in the building since about 9 o'clock, 9:30 this morning. So thank you for, you get a prize for sitting through everything with us today. So where are you located? Or where do you reside?
In my district.
Really?
Yeah, our office is in Wichita.
So okay, fantastic. And then, so I have a question though on F, on the handout here on F. So if you could just give me an example of in F using excessive physical force in carrying out a law enforcement objective. And then you read on, I want to know what you mean if it is greater than a reasonable and prudent officer would use under the same circumstances. So what's the definition of that excessive use? And I can read it, the whole thing, and then maybe it would make sense. Would you like me?
No, you're basically asking what is the definition of excessive force under subsection F?
Exactly. So deemed excessive.
Yeah, and that's not something that can be answered without a specific set of circumstances to go off of, because the excessive use of force is going to be dependent on the individual circumstances of that encounter. And it varies from the encounter, because if somebody is resisting arrest, but they're just struggling, then obviously, a baton strike or a taser or lethal force would probably be considered excessive, as opposed to if somebody's being arrested and they are trying to resist with a firearm, then deadly force would probably be justified. So there's a wide variety of situations and answers to that question.
So Madam Chair and Mike Brown, so then are we saying that we would bring, like if I bring a knife, you can't bring, well, if I just push you, you can't bring a gun in excessive force towards my push?
And again, that is such a situational thing that it has to be evaluated on an individual basis based on those circumstances surrounding that specific incident.
Okay, everything depends. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and if you'll bear with me, I'll try to act like this is a question, but it's not entirely. I was chair of the commission at the time that we adopted, I believe, basically the present version of the law, as well as the basic regulations that this represents. One of the few amendments I think we've had since they were originally adopted. The concerns about the database, the problem that we faced was what was known as the wandering officer who worked in New Jersey, and then he or she worked in Texas, and people were losing their jobs, being fired, but it was all done at that time. The officer was allowed to resign, and so that's all you knew was the officer resigned. And we had some bad situations of people who managed to get certified because we didn't have any kind of a database to truly find out what they've been doing before. And I think as the director explains, law enforcement is a very serious responsibility. We give these people guns to go out at night and if need be, shoot people. And so that's been a big change in the profession, but it's helped slow us down on the wandering officer who left one department because he or she had done something bad, but they were allowed to resign. And they went on, showed up in Kansas, and then they did the same thing to Kansas kids. The requirement about self-reporting, I thought honestly when we did the statutory scheme and the regulations that we had already specifically said, thou shalt report thyself. And it does say that, but it didn't talk about the penalty, if any, if you don't do that. And the way we keep track now of certainly in-state wandering officers is through this demographic form. So if you get fired in bug tussle, then the chief has to write out that you were under investigation at the time you were fired. That just helps us know where to start to try to make sure that only people who ought to have guns in the middle of the night and able to shoot and arrest people are doing the job. The final thing I'd like to observe, and I appreciate your patience, is unprofessional conduct for many years was a term of art in a whole bunch of licensing statutes. And as my recollection is, the Board of Healing Arts lost some disciplinary cases because the court said, that's just too vague. You can't decide today that this is unprofessional and tomorrow decide, no, it's not. You got to tell people. And so we thought about trying to put a laundry list in the statute of everything we could think of that would be unprofessional conduct. And the decision was instead put it in the regulations. That way, the executive director, the post, can come to us like they're doing right now and saying, Carmichael, you overlooked something 12 years ago or 14 years ago, whenever it was we did this, and you need to change it. And so the thought of the legislature agreed, and we put these things in regulation rather in statute to try to adapt to the circumstance. Did I get most of that about right? That's my question. Sir. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, I didn't know you were doing the testimony today. Yeah. All right, are there any other questions, comments? Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here today. It's an important role, obviously, that law enforcement plays in protecting life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as well. So thank you to our service members and officers for what they do to serve Kansans. I appreciate that. And also with this regulation, it looks to me like we're trying to, find the balance between, our officers need to be able to do the jobs that they're certified to do, but also to make sure that they are accountable to the public when they fail in that regard and somehow. And this seems to me to kind of coincide. I think we had looked at some legislation that when Kansas departments were looking to hire new officers, that they could look at other counties' records and their applications as well, because sometimes when you have a person who seeks to be certified as an officer in one county and you can't check what's going on in the others, then you get the wandering, and we want to make sure that we have the best serving Kansans. So am I kind of right that this is kind of in line with some of that?
Yes, that's correct. So there is a statute that covers when an agency hires a new officer that releases previous agencies from liability for releasing information about their employment. So that is already in statute. And this is just the KAR portion of that gives the commission the authority to act on the licensing if something like that should happen when they commit a crime and are required to self-report.
Right, because the legislature was looking to make sure that we could again, provide the best to serve as officers while at the same time, holding folks accountable. So yes, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, I'll let you move on.
Thank you, ma'am. The second KAR would be the creation of a brand-new KAR. It's 106-3-7. And this basically just codifies the different components of a handgun qualification course. Statute 745607E basically says that the commission shall establish a course of fire, but did not specify what that course of fire was or any details about it. Kansas law enforcement agencies have been adhering to a standardized course of fire for about the last 18 plus years voluntarily. This is just codifying the exact pieces of that qualification so that it's on regulation so that it's clear and concise as to what that requirement is.
Okay, are there any questions or comments on that? Well, there you go. You did good.
Very good. Thank you, Madam
Thanks
Chair and
for
committee. I
being
appreciate
here.
the time.
Thank you for your service. We appreciate it. And last but not least, I guess we're on to the state library. Oh, you are here. I didn't see you. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ray Walling, and I am the State Librarian of Kansas. In the State Library's pursuit to serve all Kansans, I'm here to discuss 4 proposed regulatory amendments related to the regional systems of cooperating libraries. 7 regional systems were developed in the 1960s with the purpose of improving and extending library service to all Kansans. Pursuant to statute, a system taxing district was established to fund services and grants provided by each system to participating libraries. Any taxing district already levying a tax of 0.25 mil to support a public library could request to be excluded from the regional system tax. Libraries choosing to participate in a regional system could benefit from the services and grants provided by its system. However, those libraries were expected to provide free service to all residents of the system territory. In return for receiving free services from participating libraries, Kansans paying the regional system tax had free access from libraries participating in the regional system to their services and resources. This simplified explanation shows that through the symbiotic relationship between regional systems, participating libraries, and taxpayers, the statutory purpose of the regional systems of cooperating libraries could be achieved. The first 3 regulatory amendments propose adjustments to different aspects of this symbiotic relationship. Currently, Regulation 5418 requires a library participating in a regional system of cooperating libraries to provide free service to Kansans in the regional system territory, subject to reasonable library rules. The amendment proposes that the reasonableness of library rules be determined by the State Library Board as a neutral arbiter when there's disagreement between a regional system and a local library. Would you like me to pause there to discuss that particular regulation or continue on?
Senator Faustigeau.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you said free services to Kansans, so exactly what do you mean? I mean, of course they can walk into the library free. Are you talking about a library card? I mean, can you?
So give an example. Let's say in Baldwin City, Kansas, you have a library there that is funded by the taxpayers of Baldwin City. But as a participating member of the system, people outside of that taxpaying area can come and use the services and resources of that library for free without having to pay for a library card like some other states require when you leave your taxing area.
Okay, all right, then I guess we can move on.
Okay, when a library decides to end participation in a regional system, Regulation 54-115 currently permits the system board to demand that property purchased with state or system funds be returned to the system. The proposed amendment removes the system's ability to demand property be returned that was purchased with state funds, as the funding was provided from the state to the library, not the system. The amendment also specifies that the State Library Board, as a neutral arbiter, shall determine the property needed to be returned to the regional system upon a library ending participation. The amendment would include this as part of the consideration of a withdrawal petition from that participating library. So again, I'll pause here to see if there's questions about that regulation.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Remind me again why a library would decide to leave the system?
It's a voluntary choice. If they don't want to provide services to people outside of their taxing area, they can choose not to participate in the system. There's a lot of benefits, obviously, receiving grants and services that the systems provide, but there are libraries that choose not to participate in systems for various reasons.
And if you're a library who chooses not to participate in the system, does that mean you're charging Kansans from other counties to check out books, to check out movies? You're charging them? Is that what that looks like?
Yeah, you can pursuant to statute. The board of the library can make that policy decision.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the state librarian? No, you can go ahead with the final one.
Okay, currently Regulation 54-117 establishes a process by which an existing local taxing district can petition to be excluded from the regional system taxing district if the local taxing district has regularly levied a tax of 0.25 mil or more to support a public library. The State Library Board may grant an order excluding the taxing district if it does not cause manifest harm to the regional system. While this decision currently is made at least 2 years after the establishment of a tax for a local library, the proposed amendment allows the governing bodies and taxpayers to request the State Library Board consider the issue of manifest harm in advance of the petition to be excluded from the regional system taxing district. A binding statement by the State Library Board could provide valuable information to governing entities and voters regarding the likelihood of a future exclusion petition being successful before a library tax is ever voted upon. I'll pause there before the last one.
Was this done in particular to respond to, like, say, the Hayes Public Library having their citizens vote to be out of the Central Kansas library system?
So these three regulations were considered.
I'm talking about the last one.
I'm sorry. Okay. The last one was considered by the State Library Board and a committee of the State Library Board. So it started out based on the situation that was going on in Hayes. And the recommendation of that committee was to develop a regulation to consider how a decision could be made in advance of the process for a petition. So the petition, again, happens 2 years later, allowing voters and the governing bodies within the county, in case Ellis County, to know what the decision on manifest harm would be made in advance of their decision to put a ballot measure out or to have voters vote, would be beneficial. So to answer your question, yes.
So is this retroactive as well?
I believe the language says both proposed and established. So as soon as it goes in.
How far back can you go? So say they did this 10 years ago with this, then you can say, oh, well, manifest harm. Oh, you've done this for 10 years. And who makes that final decision? Because if I'm reading this, it says that the only one who has to say that there's manifest harm is the regional library system. And if they say it is, then it is. No one else has you don't have appeal, you don't have any kind of public hearing within the district of wherever the library is. Is that correct?
So this regulation actually creates that process for the State Library Board to make the determination about the petition and manifest harm in regards to the system and the library involved.
I just think this is you're causing manifest harm on someone who specifically decided to do something, as if you want to know my opinion. Are there any other questions or comments? Representative Carmichael.
Just so that I can understand the procedure, the library board can make a finding, whatever type it is, but is that subject to the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act so that the board's determination can be appealed to the courts eventually to see if the courts agree that there was manifest harm, and that can be appealed to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court?
I would have to ask legal counsel on the agency about that.
I think it is, but I don't know for sure.
Thank you.
I hate to send the revisers on a goose chase, but.
Okay.
Or a duck hunt.
A duck hunt. I know that we have a couple, you have a question? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know that when I served on the local committee, or the Senate Committee on Local Government, we did address issues between regional libraries and the state library. Do you believe the changes to the regulations would help that process?
So two thoughts on that. First of all, since I think you're talking about House Bill 2176 from last, 2 sessions ago, I guess now, that bill was a special district created by statute versus going through the process a regular established district in statute would go through. It's a regular established library district would go through. Does that make sense?
Are there any other questions from the committee? We do have some people coming in on WebEx, so if you will stay available. Who is up first, if I could ask? Who's up first? It would be Melanie or Brandon? Okay, Brandon Hines from the Hayes Public Library. Please introduce yourself again and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brandon Hines. I'm the director of the Hayes Public Library, and I'm representing the library today. I want to start by extending our appreciation to the State Library Board and the State Librarian Ray Walling for addressing some regulation matters that we believe are long overdue. We support the proposed amendments to KAR 5418, which is the provision of free service, and 541-15, which is the transfer of property. However, we respectfully oppose the proposed amendment to KAR 54-1-17, which is the one pertaining to that process by which a local library may withdraw from a regional library system taxing district. As it's currently written, the amendment establishes an imbalanced process. It guarantees the regional library system an opportunity to present its case regarding manifest harm, yet it does not extend that same opportunity to the people who are paying the tax for that, the citizens, to the local governments, or even to the libraries. At minimum, we feel that this regulation should require a formal process, with a public hearing, to ensure that all stakeholders are heard. This amended change doesn't resolve the underlying issue that's within statute. It's KSA 75-2550 in Section B. Again, that's KSA 75-2550 Section B, that's where it grants the authority to the State Library Board to deny a taxing district's withdrawal from a regional library system based on this manifest harm determination. The statute lacks the language and the clarity that it presents significant barrier to local control and could undermine the vote of local voters or prevent them from even happening. It said, Mr. Walling's statement said, this provides valuable information to voters, but really it seals the deal on what the vote would be, because it would allow voters to, have to decide whether you're going to be paying 2 taxes. If the state determines manifest harm, that means they would have to pay the regional library tax indefinitely on top of the local tax. And the way it works is, if you have an established library, as Mr. Walling pointed out, such as Hayes, our taxing district is the city limits of Hayes. anything within the regional library system that's outside a taxing district, such as rural Ellis County, would be taxed for the regional library system. Well, if you created a county library, you would have to pay both taxes if the state library determined manifest harm. This is a non-elected board that would be going against the will of local voters. Again, we oppose the amendment KR 54-117 because it grants a disproportionate influence to the regional library systems while limiting the voice of local voters. We feel like this is more of a legislative issue and not a regulation issue, and we'd encourage the state library board to work with the legislature to work on this manifest harm issue that is currently within statute. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brandon. Does anyone have any questions for Brandon? Brandon, I'm just gonna ask, when was the vote held and what was the result of the vote
In August
in Ellis County?
Yes, Madam Chair, yeah. In August of 2024, over 73% of the Ellis County voters and every single precinct within the county approved the formation of the county library.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right. Hang on, just in case we need you back, I'll give you a call. I'll holler. We're going to move on to Melanie Hegspath, Director of the Salina Public Library.
Yes, thank you. I want to recognize and commend the state librarian, Ray Walling, for his work on updating the regulations. Overall, we're very encouraged by the changes provided. Regulation 54-117, we also want to talk about. It does outline the process by which a taxing area can seek exclusion from the regional library system. The regional systems levy taxes on all property not included within a library district. Those regional systems then decide how they want to distribute a portion of those funds from taxpayers, and each regional system operates completely independently with its own structure and policies. So our concern pertains to Section C of KAR 54-117. After that official request for exclusion is submitted, the regulation then outlines that a determination is going to be made regarding manifest harm to the regional system. And it does provide the regional system with the opportunity to present its position to the State Library Board. It is, of course, appropriate for the regional system to be heard, but it's also equally important that taxpayers, local government, individual libraries, or their chosen representatives have the opportunity to present their perspective at the same point in the process. Although an official statement is submitted at the beginning, ensuring that all the affected parties are meaningfully heard during the proceedings themselves is essential to a more fair and balanced decision-making process. It is a minor change. It would just help improve clarity and fairness. So we respectfully request that the committee consider looking at ways to implement mechanisms to ensure some more balanced input for all parties, including those seeking the change, so everybody's perspectives are fully represented. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right. Well, I will give you some numbers. In 2023, Ellis County collected over $292,000 in property taxes for the central library system. And what the central library system is supposed to be doing, if I understand correctly, is and then they return funds to the counties to help them get things done, and they get less than 25% of what they've given, and in fact are obviously supplying funds for other libraries, which I'm sure in that 17-county district. Mr. Walling, if you could come up, is there, if they're requesting that you add more to this regulation, are you willing to hold that aside until you can get more input on that? Or are you, what is your feeling about that?
Oh, sorry. Should we repeat that or? Okay, I apologize. The current way the State Library Board operates, first, in regards to the exclusion of a taxing district, requires that a petition be filed by the entity seeking exclusion, which in theory, would allow the taxing district to make their case for why they should be able to be removed. Additionally, the State Library Board allows for public comment periods during its meetings to allow for the public, for libraries, for others to make comments about a particular issue that is before the board. And in theory, because a hearing is scheduled about this issue during the State Library Board meeting, there would be an opportunity for those to comment. So to go back to your question, if we want to specify that further, I don't have a problem doing that. I also don't want to delay the opportunity for an entity like Ellis County to be able to seek a decision. Does that make sense?
It makes sense that you want to get this done, and just so that you can do what you want to do, so that you can punish the people that don't want to be a part of that system. And since they are paying for a lot of things in the system and not getting even a partial percentage back for their library, it seems like they're not getting their bang for their buck. So I'm going to reiterate, because you have people that would like to have it more specific, is there any reason why you have to hurry and do this last regulation, or just go back and look through it? Because you know as well as I do, very few people go to meetings for agencies such as that, and very few people, they can stand up and say something and you can just say, no, I'm not interested. Kind of like this meeting. So I'm asking that you hold back that regulation so that you can listen to the concerns of people, not only myself, of other libraries within the state, and giving more of a voice to the rest of the people. Since I think you heard the voice of Ellis County voters, yes?
Yes.
So are you listening to them? I don't think you are, and it doesn't tell me that you're going to either. So I'm going to ask that question again. Is there a way that you would be willing to hold back this final regulation and then perhaps fine tune it before you rush that right through?
Absolutely.
Okay, so will you please?
Well, no,
Is that a
just an
yes?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And what I would ask is, I think it would be appropriate to get that feedback, to continue with the public comment period, continue with the public hearing, to listen to that feedback, and then revisit that particular regulation, just as, I mean, with any regulation, but in this particular case, as you're requesting, to have that opportunity for more comment and to fine tune the regulation. I'm fine with that, absolutely.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you. I share the chair's concern, and maybe I should have saved this for comments, but might as well get it done now. I'm not sure that this third regulation does, in fact, afford an opportunity to be heard. It's very different to be appearing on a docket where it is the consideration of an action by a board, and you make your evidentiary record there so that there is a record on appeal. It's very different than telling people, well, you can show up at the end of the meeting for the public comment period, especially after the board's already taken its action. I think that either the regulation needs to be tailored to make sure that the board gets to listen to everybody who wants to be heard on this issue, not as a part of the public comment, but as a part of the decision-making process. And I think also if the board doesn't do that, we ought to fix it.
Yes, I do. I agree. Is there any other comment? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I'm a little confused because this does set a hearing, right? And that, unless, I'm sorry?
I don't think that's the same, Senator.
Within 30 days after the receipt of a petition for exclusion, set a hearing. That's already in the regulations. So the hearing is going to happen. And unless the idea is to say, you know, it's a public hearing or, you know, just to add comments from the public will be accepted, you're having a hearing. And the library presented a petition, so their information is there. You know, right now, they still have that question to determine if the exclusion will do no manifest harm. So that seems to me that's current, and I'm trying to understand.
Well, I'll answer how I look at it.
Okay.
I see that they can talk about it, and the regional library system can talk about it, and then they can decide, do we have it? We've got manifest harm, and then they will tax the Ellis County citizens then twice, because they have voted to keep the money to take care of their county library system by themselves. And this is a very closed, as was said, they are not elected. They have a very closed system of making a decision. So you can have as many hearings as you want to. But this whole regulation says, oh, we're gonna make sure you guys pay because you shouldn't have done what you did. We don't like it. So public hearing, that's great, but that's not going to change anything. They're going to do what they want to do, and they've made it very clear what they want to do. And it's the minute I looked at this, I said, this is in direct response to the voters of Ellis County and what they decided to do. And it may not be as important to other people as it is to me, but it will affect any other libraries in the state that decide that they don't want to be a part of the Central Kansas library system. But they're going to be forced to do it. So.
I'll just comment that I did hear a lot from various libraries when we were looking at the House bill regarding libraries. And I'm glad that there will be a public comment opportunity. And this discussion today, I think, is going to just alert people more to that. And I look forward to the response after that other public comment is given.
All right. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you. Just in brief response to my friend the senator's comments, whom I almost always agree with, and when I don't, she's usually right. But I think we specifically state here that the board makes such a determination during the hearing, then the regional system of cooperating libraries have the opportunity to be heard. But what the gentleman tells us is taxpayers and the public, they can show up for the public comment section after the state board has made such a determination. I mean, that's not the way this is supposed to work.
Senator Francisco.
I often agree with the representative. So the public has an opportunity to make their comments during the hearing. Wouldn't that be at the same time that this decision is being made? I'm just trying to understand the timeline of comments and perhaps.
So this actual regulation hasn't been used in some time. Let's put that first. The State Library Board typically has, actually ever since I've been chair, has the public comment period at the very beginning of its board meetings. So it wouldn't be after the board happens. But having said that, I respect what the chair and the ranking member have said about revisiting this to have a clearer process that's fair to the regional system, fair to the libraries, fair to the public. I'm perfectly happy to do that. And I think listening during the public comment period, during the public hearing, to gather that information, then revisit at the request to factor that in and to have that in the regulation moving forward. I'm perfectly happy to do that.
Once you have the public hearing, then you can go ahead and adopt your regulation just the way it is. Doesn't matter what someone says. I'm asking you to pull this from being heard and saving it for another time so that you can get more information and hear from more people in a different way and also hear from someone like me. So that's what I'm asking for. We're trying to stop a freight train from running. I know that that's a lot. But we have had many agencies stop things prior to this when we've asked them to. So I'm just asking you to put the brakes on the third one. And you know what I'm talking about. Because once you have that hearing, then you can that regulation just goes into effect. And clearly, we don't have the ability to stop it. I'm asking you, and in your position as state librarian, to do such a thing.
We will do that.
All right, I have your word. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you for your presentation. Just a comment, I'm looking at property taxes and who assesses them on our residents in Kansas, and I believe it's an accurate statement to say that our county libraries as a taxing entity tax our residential homeowners at a higher rate than the state of Kansas does, considering that with recent legislation, the state of Kansas is entirely out of collecting and charging and assessing property taxes. So I guess just a statement from the revisor, just to make sure that my recollection is clear on that the state of Kansas is no longer collecting residential property taxes. No. That's correct. And so my question is, now that our county libraries continue to tax our residential property owners, where, if this regulation were to become enacted as it currently is, which you've just assured us you're going to stop and take a look at it before you do that, where is the accountability for the taxpayers if the board making these decisions they're not elected, and so where does the taxpayer find the ability to hold the board accountable?
I think this raises a question that's in statute. What is the intent of the legislature to have the board go through this process to consider manifest harm? Because it's not just regulatory, it's in statute that we, as a board, have to consider, does this cause manifest harm to the system? Is the intent of the legislature to try to retain those systems to support the vast majority of libraries in our state that serve populations under 2,500 people? As well as all libraries. I want to just exclude
So it looks
library.
like perhaps the legislature has a job to do here as well. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I heard the reference to county libraries, but this would not necessarily be, I mean, all libraries are not county libraries. We have a number that are municipal libraries, and so the taxing district is not necessarily countywide.
Correct.
For those libraries.
Well,
Thank you.
the vote in Ellis County was a county-wide county library system.
And I understand that.
All right.
But my comment was that we were talking about, I mean, when they talked about property tax, they particularly, the mention was of a county, you know, as if this is county libraries, and that property tax could be the city of Lawrence, or it could be a county-wide library.
Mm-hmm. All right. Does anyone else have a question? This went a little bit longer than we expected. Sorry to keep everyone from lunch. Yes, Mr. Walling.
Did you want to review 54-123? I believe that's also on the agenda. I apologize.
I don't see that. It was not given to us, so we can't hear it today. It was not included in our packet.
Which number was the authority? What was the number?
The-
It's in a separate, it's not in the same one, it's a separate.
Yeah, there's two separate.
Yes. Thank you. 24-123. When did we get this? Just this morning? It was mailed. Okay, that, I don't see that in mine. Okay. Go ahead.
The fourth regulatory amendment relates to state funding for regional systems of cooperating libraries pursuant to the State Grants and Aid to Libraries Act. Statute requires 1/3 of appropriated funding for this act to be distributed to the regional systems in components. First, an equal base amount, and second, a formula that considers population and territory size of the regional system. Regulation 54-123 currently clarifies how the appropriation is to be split between the base and formula portion, and then the details of the actual formula. The proposed amendment addresses 3 issues. 1, clarifying the relationship between population and territory in the formula that is undefined in Clause B currently. 2, poorly written clauses under C regarding how increases and decreases in appropriations affect the base and formula amounts. The proposed amendment is much clearer and is not dependent on the previous agency employee's interpretation of the clause correctly. And third, the concern of the Attorney General's office that the current Clause D is not aligned with statute, which requires population and territory size to be factors in aid distribution. The proposed amendment ensures a proportion of the appropriation is allocated based on population and territory size. Any questions on that?
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you. Just by way of example, or somehow, will this substantively impact the method in which these grant funds are, who gets what? If we make these changes, is that going to mean that there's a substantive change in favoring rural libraries over urban libraries or vice versa? What's the impact of doing it this way as opposed to the way that it's been done in the past?
So this is specifically talking about regional systems of cooperating libraries, not public libraries in municipalities or counties or wherever they exist.
I'm sorry, amend my question.
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify that. So it doesn't change the ratio of the population amount and the territory amount and how that formula is calculated. It's said differently, but it doesn't change the proportions. It does change the amount that is allocated for the base amount versus the formula-based amounts. Currently, the formula-based amount, I think, accounts for 6 or 7% of, if I remember right, economic impact statement. This increases the formula amount to about 25% when the aid appropriation from the budget bill is above 1.5 million. So it actually increases the amount for formula-based aid that is based on population and territory size. And then, like I said earlier, it changes how the proportion of the base and formula are calculated, so it's much clearer than exists in statute where C1 and 2 say something and then C3 and 4 say something completely different. So.
And I apologize, when I got the packet, I did receive this. For some reason, when I was hole punching and putting it into my notebook, I didn't see this regulation. So I apologize that I didn't use the correct language a few moments ago. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you.
Since I'm still recognized, and I don't mean to imply it was your fault, it's nobody's fault but my own that I didn't review this before this hearing.
I don't see the, two of the stamps on this final regulation. And I also see a very defensive state aid regulation amendment was developed in some consultation with the regional system directors. It was in an open meeting, which includes members of the general public and librarians representing different communities and libraries across the state. I think this is another issue. Okay, all right. All right, does anyone else have any questions about this? I don't think this is right either, but you know, I'm cannibalizing my committee to other things. So at this point, you and I stand in disagreement on a lot of this. So anyway, if there isn't anything else, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you for your help. Oh, Senator Francisco, I apologize.
I wanted to make sure that I understood, and I did have this in my packet, sort of the difference, because we have right now the D that talks about total authorization decreased or below the level of the 1989 amount. And that may not be applicable at this point, but that talks about future increases. So it seems like, my understanding is this just sets a base of $1.5 million, and that, if it's above that, the money, 3/4 is divided equally among the systems. And then if it's not among that, you go back to, you don't use so much population and territory. Is that?
That's correct.
So I'm just hoping that this would actually provide more to population and territory, which is important to a lot of Kansans.
All right. Are there any other questions or concerns? Thank you for being here. All right. The next thing we need to do is just go over what we've done. Do you have any other discussion or comments on any of the proposed rules and regs? Yes.
Yeah, she has that information about the Administrative Procedures Act and how it relates to the library board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jenna Moyer, Office of Revisor Statutes. Together, Jesse and I looked up the Administrative Procedure Act, and that statute is 77. I'd have to look it up again, but it requires a statute specifically authorizing the use of the Administrative Procedure Act for it to apply. I didn't look through every single library statutes, but my cursory review did not find any statutes that specifically apply the Administrative Procedure Act. We also looked at the Judicial Review Act, and that act applies unless it is specifically exempted. And because these statutes do not appear to specifically exempt themselves from the Judicial Review Act, that would apply. So long story short, we believe that CAPA doesn't apply, but Judicial Review Act would apply.
That answers my question.
All right. Okay, do we have any other discussions or comments on proposed rules and regulations? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the Office of the State Bank Commissioner, my comment would be that I would like to see some limitation or direction regarding the administrator may issue an exception to this positive net worth requirement. Because I think that is quite a bit of change to say now we have a net worth requirement. We're changing how it's being determined, but then we're also allowing a complete exemption.
Okay. Representative Corbett.
What I'd like to know, or a suggestion would be, on the senior lifetime hunting license, the people 65 to 75, I'd like to see the previous verbiage for selling them would be $40 until we can get some better language other than what was made up today. I mean, it's sad to double it because the reason it's even there, they forgot to see the expiration date. It's not our job to watch what they're doing.
Right.
So they dropped the ball, double the price. I don't think that's fair to seniors.
All right. Does anybody else have a? I obviously have the concern about 54-1-17 with the state library, that they withhold that from going through to public hearing and come back and look at it again and try to listen to the voters, et cetera. So does that make any sense? Yes.
For a different one, if there's any.
Yes. Oh, what?
Go ahead and finish whatever you're on before we go to the next.
No, it's for
A different one. So Representative Carmichael.
I don't know if he's wanting to catch my attention, but my comments, for example, about night hunting don't need to be in our report. I've already lost that battle legislatively. I'll just take cover after dark, okay? But what I did want to mention, it doesn't need to go in the report, but maybe we ought to, we've had a rocky relationship with Wildlife and Parks, and I really do appreciate the secretary coming down here personally with some staff. And I told him, I said, man, I wouldn't go down there if I were you for anything. I'd send people down there, you know. He said, no, it's my job. He says, I'm not going to send my people down there. I'll come down there and do it myself. So I give him some credit for trying to work with us. It's a better situation than it has been.
And then he left his staff member to take any heat that we had left. So poor Martin just gets to stick around and listen to any complaints.
Phone a friend.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am a little hesitant to see this committee recommend something in regs that doesn't follow statute. I think that could get us in a lot of trouble. And I know that we would like lower fees for seniors. So one thing that I would suggest is that they don't have a 5-year permit, but they do annual permits, because I think that, otherwise what we're really doing is encouraging somebody to sign up for a 5-year permit, and then if we reduce it next year, they've already paid the money for that 5-year permit. So I think the one thing I might suggest is, you know, just go back to what's the lowest you can offer for an annual permit, and then come back to us if the legislature fails to do anything next year to help with that cost. Does that make any sense mathematically?
Well, I think what you're saying makes sense, but my concern is, and maybe I'm way off base, is the fact that we did something through statute to give them a lifetime hunting and fishing license. Did we mess things up by suddenly putting that into statute? Should we have not said anything, or did we do it because they were just raising fees? I don't know who that question goes to. Representative Corbett.
The thing that really screams at this event is they dropped the ball in 20. We're in 25 now, and we're here playing, finding a legal or illegal wiggle room to establish a license at twice the price. It's kind of like, for them, would be a win-win-win-win. Yeah. For the seniors who did nothing wrong, they've been screwed for 5 years because they couldn't get the deal. You know what I'm saying? Even though they say they're selling them, I've had senior after senior call me and say, I can't get that 5-year license. So whatever it is, it'll get fixed eventually, but
Well, if we want to make sure it gets done, we got to do it statutorily, though, since we put that sunset in there. That, I mean, I don't.
That's
Yeah,
Representative
and maybe
Sawyer
not
saying that,
bundling it.
just in
Don't
case.
bundle it with a
I
duck
just-
bill.
that-
They have
I
questionable
wanna make sure you
authority to
get-
do it since we put a sunset saying, well, we put it in place and then said it sunsets in 2020. So I think to make it clear, we got to pass a statute.
Right. Okay. Senator Warren.
Thank you.
Yes, and
That
then
was
we'll
kind
go-
of my
Sorry,
question. Well, what
Jordan, I
authority do
forgot.
you have to be doing this and not that, or be doing anything in it? So, thank you.
All right. Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes,
General
he
Moyer,
does.
Advisor
He's
Statutes.
going to burst if he doesn't get to say what he wants to.
I will mention earlier, I stated that there is authority for generic hunting and fishing licenses. There's also authority for lifetime hunting and fishing licenses, not specifically for seniors, but just that generic authority to have lifetime hunting and fishing licenses.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So then that was part of my questioning too, as well. If you have that authority, then why are you picking it to raise it to this amount, to limit it to 5 years, rather than when you turn 65, then it's lifetime? And, you know, which part of the stool are you looking at to support what your proposed regulation is?
The statute that expired in 2020 set a cap that the price of a senior hunting and fishing license could not be more than, and I believe it was like 1/8 of a regular hunting and or fishing license. So it set that statutory cap, and therefore what had to be reflected in their rules and regulations was that this license couldn't be more than X amount of dollars. And so without that statute setting that cap for seniors, the cap is now just the cap for regular hunting and fishing licenses.
Okay. All right. Did you have anything else, Representative Sawyer? Okay. All right. Jordan, you finally get to say what you want to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. I just wanted to remind the committee of a request that was made also of KDWP. Earlier, it was asked about them providing the amount of property taxes paid per county and a breakdown of fees paid toward those taxes. So I wanted to ask if that was going to be a committee recommendation for the report.
I don't have a problem with that. Does anyone else? No, that's fine. No, that's a committee request then. All right. Well, Senator Francisco, it's
Thank you,
her
Madam
fault.
Chair. So I'm confused if this idea that we suggest that they look at just annual license fees is something that the rest of the committee would want to recommend or not.
I would say
So I think the issue right now that we have is they've said here, we're going to set an amount for a 5-year hunting and license, or combination or individual ones. But if the legislature decides to reduce it, everybody who buys that 5-year fee under this regulation would probably be paying more than they might if they got one annual fee and then a reduced fee. So I was just suggesting that they look at that, because it seems like the concern is how much money we're asking people to spend. And if someone goes and says, okay, I'm going to do better with a 5-year fee, we're not giving them any information that the legislature, or many legislators are concerned about this, and I'm doing that because part of this is our failure to get this bill passed last year.
Representative Corbett.
I make a motion to adjourn. We want to set the next meeting before we adjourn.
Do we
We
need?
don't get paid if we don't have a meeting, Ken.
Did you have some ideas there, Jordan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So currently, we have made it through everything that has been published in the register that's currently out there in the 60-day comment period. However, if something were to be published, say, next Thursday, for example, that would mean we would need a meeting around the end of September, somewhere before
Okay.
October 6th.
And you'll just let us know so that we
Sure.
can try to figure that out. Okay? All right. Is there anything else? If not, then I will do what Representative Corbett wanted us to do. This